Chapter 601 Sudden Change. Inside the space aircraft, the atmosphere was gloomy and gloomy. On the round center stage, Zhao Budian suddenly squatted and sat down. He suddenly stood up and paced around, his dark blue eyes filled with anxiety. Around the circular platform, Wu Zhu and the other dozens of people had different expressions, all of them remaining silent. Almost 2 days have passed, right? It can't be. After an unknown period of time, a skinny old man in a green robe finally broke the silence of this space. He did not say anything else, but everyone understood what he meant. Tang Huan and Feng Ming definitely went out to stop Fen Tian from chasing after them. If Tang Huan and Yu Shan had won, they would have definitely returned to the space aircraft already, but until now, they were still nowhere to be seen. The result of the battle outside was obvious. Tang Huan and Feng Ming had definitely been viciously attacked by Fen Tian. Unfortunately, after Tang Huan left the space aircraft, the transparent wall had already returned to its original state. No one could see what was happening outside anymore. If not, they would more or less be able to obtain some information about the outside of the aircraft. Yeah. On the round platform, Zhao Budian bared his fangs and brandished his claws at the green-robed elder as he cried out. His large eyes were filled with anger. Little fellow, this old man also hopes that little brother Tang Huan is safe and sound. If he is still alive, then we can all be alive. The old man in green shook his head and could not help but laugh bitterly. Yeah, that Fen Tian is really too strong. If His Sacred Emperor Majesty was still here, he might be able to suppress it. Even if the old man from Tian clan did not die, they would still be able to share the glory. It's a pity that His Sacred Emperor Majesty had already passed away. Another tall and sturdy old man with completely white beard sighed. Although little brother Tang Huan is strong, he is still young in the end. Even with Feng Ming's help, it would be difficult for him to match up to Fen Tian. If only it will be another 10 years. With little brother Tang Huan's talent, he will definitely surpass Fen Tian. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have left the God-forbidding cave. A short old man suddenly said hatefully, in the God-forbidding cave, although there is no freedom, at least one can still live. But in this damned place, not only is there no freedom, in the end, one can even starve to death. Mochi, are you addicted to being a prisoner? Hearing that, the tall and sturdy old man could not help but frown, and said angrily, this old man would rather starve to death here than be imprisoned in God-forbidding cave again. Mochi, little brother Tang Huan brought you out of that dark place. It's fine if you don't feel grateful, but you actually dare to say such rude words. Wu Zhu said angrily as well. Yan Wuji, Wu Zhu, am I wrong? The short elder called Mochi slowly stood up. That Tang Huan doesn't have the strength, so don't try to show off at Dark Abyss's place. Now, not only will he harm himself, he will also harm all of us here. Yeah. Zhao Budian angrily flapped her little wings as she rushed in front of Mochi, crying out repeatedly. Her 2 little claws were also gesturing non-stop, as if scolding him. But at that moment, Mochi suddenly stretched out both of his arms, and his hands that were as skinny as firewood grabbed onto Zhao Budian's neck. Yeah. Zhao Budian flapped his wings and struggled desperately. However, the more he struggled, the tighter both of his hands were clasped, and his mouth opened wide uncontrollably. His pair of deep blue eyes were wide open, filled with an expression of disbelief. Mochi, what are you doing? Let it go. This sudden change caused Wu Zhu and Yan Wuji to be startled and furious. They shouted out loud, and upon seeing what happened, everyone was shocked. Everyone, do you know what this is? Spiritual beast blue dragon. However, Mochi laughed out loud. This spiritual beast's spirit dragon sacred marrow has a miraculous healing effect. Furthermore, this is a 6-winged blue dragon apostrophe, and its 4th pair of wings is about to grow. We have been imprisoned in the God-forbidden cave for over 100 years. Although we have survived until now, we have always been trapped in the dark spirit devil chi with countless internal injuries. Even if we were to return to the glory continent, it would be impossible to recover to the state we were in back then. I believe that everyone is very clear about this point. After entering the aircraft, I had always wanted to recover, but until now, I have only recovered to the level of a stage 4 martial master. Give me a few more years, and I'll be able to become a stage 6 martial master, and that'll be good enough. If a miracle doesn't happen, even if I cultivate till I die, I will still only be a stage 6 martial master. But with this spirit dragon sacred marrow apostrophe, it is completely different. With it, all the hidden injuries in my body can be healed, and I will not only be able to quickly step back into the stage 9 martial saint realm, I can even go one step further. Everyone, this blue dragon has no small number of spirit dragon sacred marrow. Would you all be willing to enjoy it with me? Insane. This is simply insane. Wuzhu was furious. Mochi, this old man really did not expect you to be so ungrateful. Everyone, we were all saved by little brother Tang Huan, who is willing to join this old man in killing this heartless, wolf-hearted thing. Yan Wuji was instantly like a hedgehog. His beard went wild and his face filled with anger. I am ashamed to be associated with such a despicable person. An old lady with a long hair and chicken skin suddenly spoke out and stood beside Yan Wuji. She looked at him with eyes filled with disdain. Brother Yan, count me in. After a while, there were 6 people gathered by Yan Wuji and Wuzhu's side, but more and more people hid themselves from view. Many of them had emotions in their eyes. Those who are willing to enjoy this spirit dragon sacred marrow with me, come over. Suddenly, Mochi looked around and laughed out loud. After he finished saying those words, although no one moved, many people started to move. Seeing that, Mochi smiled. Everyone, there is no need to worry. This space aircraft is so big, it must be unstable. As long as we are promoted back to stage 9 martial saint, we can work together to break through this space aircraft, and force our way out. We will not starve to death here. Me too. This old man is willing to give it a try. One figure after another walked towards Mochi. In the blink of an eye, there were only 6 people by Yan Wuji and his side, while beside Mochi's side, there were more than 20. Mochi's last words dispelled the last bit of worry in many people's heart, and instantly divided them into 2 sides. Yan Wuji, Wuzhu, and everyone else, since we have been companions in the God-forbidden cave for dozens of years, I will give you all one last chance. Mochi smiled as he looked at Yan Wuji, Wuzhu and the rest. Ungrateful and unscrupulous. A cruel, unscrupulous person. Wuzhu was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He never expected that the final outcome would be like this. Mochi, stop putting on an act. Yan Wuji also laughed out of extreme anger. Since that's the case, I can only fulfill your wish. Everyone, move together, kill them all. Mochi's face turned cold as he bellowed. But right at that moment, the space aircraft suddenly trembled, and on the walls surrounding it, a green light quickly shined. Phew. An instant later, 2 figures appeared at almost the same time. It was Tang Huan and Feng Ming. Chapter 602, Lightning Fury. Little brother Tang Huan. After a brief moment of shock, cries of surprise broke out from within the space. Wuzhu, Yan Wuji and the others were pleasantly surprised, and the expressions of Mochi and the rest of the 20-odd people changed. Especially Mochi. His expression was extremely ugly to behold. He had originally thought that Tang Huan and Feng Ming had not returned for a long time because they had been viciously attacked by Fen Tian. That was why he dared to covet the spirit dragon sacred marrow of Zhao Budian's golden horn. Otherwise, even if he was lent 10,000 times the courage, he wouldn't dare act rashly. After all, Tang Huan was a genuine peak stage 9 martial saint. Even though he was also a former peak stage 9 martial saint, his current strength was only equivalent to a stage 4 martial master, and the difference in strength was too great. Tang Huan only needed to move a finger to stab him to death. But who would have thought that Tang Huan and Yu Shan actually came back alive? Mochi's hands were trembling. The depths of his heart was filled with fear and resentment. This blue dragon was Tang Huan's spirit pet. If he made a move on it, how could Tang Huan forgive him so easily? Tang Huan had returned at the wrong time. Even if he came back by 1 or 2 hours late, she would have nothing to fear from him. The other 20-odd people by Mochi's side were also feeling anxious. Although they did not personally make a move against Blue Dragon, their actions just now had already caused them and Mochi to become grasshoppers on a rope. If they had known earlier on that Tang Huan was still alive and would return right now, they definitely wouldn't have made such a choice. Now, how was he to endure Tang Huan's wrath? For a time, everyone was full of regret. Yi, ya! Zhao Budian's eyes flashed with excitement. She cried out with difficulty. Her mouth opened wide. Her bright red tongue had a long grin. She was almost unable to breathe. Zhao Budian. After looking at Zhao Budian's situation, Tang Huan's face changed. Although he did not know what had just happened, but he could feel that Mochi was harboring malicious intentions towards Zhao Budian. In an instant, the killing intent in Tang Huan's two eyes condensed to the point where it seemed to be real, and could seemingly penetrate Mochi's body. Tang Huan, don't come near me, don't come near me, or else I'll kill it. Mochi shuddered and came back to his senses, growling out loud. The extreme fear and panic had already caused his face to contort and he retreated several steps, as if he wanted to hide into the crowd. At this time, his two claws had already unconsciously increased his strength, causing Zhao Budian's eyeballs to bulge out of their sockets. Let it go. Tang Huan's eyes were cold as he shouted word by word. As soon as he said that, an extremely terrifying aura swept out like a storm. In the next moment, this green space seemed to have frozen, and the surroundings were deathly silent. Pada! A light sound suddenly broke the silence in this space, but Mochi was unable to control himself and released his hands, causing Zhao Budian to fall onto the ground, his two little claws clutching his neck. As he gasped for breath, Mochi regained his senses and bent down to reach for his arm in a hurry, wanting to catch Zhao Budian once again. However, before he could even touch Zhao Budian, Mochi's body had already floated up from the ground. Tang Huan suddenly appeared in front of him, grabbed his neck with his right hand and directly lifted him up. Mochi moved his hands and feet recklessly. His face had already swollen to the point of purple as his bulging eyes were filled with despair and pleading. Spare me. Just as he squeezed out these few words from his throat with great difficulty, a snapping sound rang out. It was Tang Huan who snapped his neck. Mochi's head tilted, his eyes gradually becoming hollow, and no longer had any signs of life. In the space between Tang Huan's mind and Struck's, in a second, a ball of hot, restrained flame rose from his palm, which then engulfed Mochi's short and thin body. In just a few seconds, the former peak stage 9 ranker had turned into ashes, as if he had never existed. Yeah. Zhao Budian finally regained his breath, shakily fluttered his little wings and floated in front of Tang Huan, pointing at the 20-odd people in front of him while complaining to Tang Huan angrily. Tang Huan patted Zhao Budian's head. Two pairs of eyes swept past him and revealed a cold glint. The people around them kept quiet, not daring to make a sound. There was panic on their faces. They had all witnessed Mochi's disappearance. They had already expected Mochi's ending, but they still hadn't expected that Tang Huan would act so decisively. He killed Mochi without even asking, and from this it could be seen how much weight Blue Dragon had in Tang Huan's heart. Senior Wuzhou, what happened here just now? Just as everyone was worried, Tang Huan withdrew his gaze and looked at Wuzhou. Little brother, Mochi thought that you and Lady Fengming had been harmed by Fentian, so he captured the Blue Dragon and incited these people to share the Spirit Dragon's sacred marrow. After recovering your strength, he prepared to break the space aircraft forcefully so that you wouldn't starve to death. Wuzhou came back to reality and sighed. Mochi's death caused Wuzhou to sigh endlessly. He had been bullied by the Demon Clan for dozens of years, especially in recent years, but in the end, he was able to endure it all and rushed out of the dark abyss. Although Mochi died under Tang Huan's hands, this was not to be blamed on Tang Huan. No matter who it was, if something like that happened, Mochi would never be spared. So that's how it is. After my battle with Tang Huan, Fentian had already retreated. I had also consumed a lot of energy and cultivated outside for 2 days before I could finally recover, so I came back a bit late. However, I didn't expect that I would almost lose Zhao Budian's life. If it were only the consumption of the genuine qi and the mind power, it would naturally be able to quickly be replenished. However, the side effects of the Nine Yang Divine Furnace being overoperated actually caused Tang Huan to have to spend 2 days to recover. He also did not expect that Mochi and the others would not even be able to wait for this little bit of time. Fen Tian lost? Yan Wuji could not help but exclaim, and the surrounding sounds of people sucking in cold air could be heard. For Tang Huan and Feng Ming to be able to come back, the result was obvious. But it was just a guess, and now that they heard the result from Tang Huan, they were extremely shocked. At this moment, the 20 or so people felt even more regretful. I did not win, and Fen Tian did not lose. Tang Huan smiled lightly. A draw? Yan Wuji was still in shock. He clapped his hands and praised, "Little brother, you are only in your 20s, to be able to tie with Demon Lord Fen Tian is already very amazing. I've lived for over 100 years. But this is the first time I've seen a peerless genius like you, little brother. It's a draw now. In a few years, Fen Tian will not be a match for you, little brother." The voices of praise rose again, and Tang Huan no longer explained. It was simply impossible to explain the reason for Fen Tian's retreat. After a long while, the entire space finally quieted down. Chapter 603. Send them on their way. What do you think I should do with you? Tang Huan's gaze once again landed on the 20-odd people, and the corner of his mouth hooked into a cold smile. Everyone was silent. All kinds of expressions could be seen: regret, panic, nervousness, bitter smiles, dejection, hesitation. Wu Zhu hesitated for a moment, then couldn't help but say, "Little brother, Mochi is the head of the evil. He deserved to die. They were only instigated by Mochi. They are not guilty." "Brother Wu Zhu, you're too kind." Before he could even finish his last word, Yan Wuji could not help but interrupt him and let out a cold snort. In this old man's opinion, all of these people deserve to die. Although our strength is not as good as Mochi's, we are still roughly at the level of Stage 2 martial disciple and Stage 3 martial disciple. Wu Zhu laughed bitterly and shook his head, no longer saying anything. The more Yan Wuji spoke, the angrier he became. They are people who have lived for almost 100 years, or even over 100 years, yet they don't even know how to repay favors. Only Fen Tian has never came to the God-forbidding cave to recruit people. If not, they would have pledged their allegiance to the demon clan already. Yan Wuji, what you said was too unpleasant to listen to. No matter how much this old man cherishes his life, he will not rely on the demon clan. A horse-faced old man finally couldn't help but ask, "Do you believe the words of an ungrateful person?" Yan Wuji scoffed. "As far as I know, there are many people in the God-forbidding cave who have expressed their wish to rely on the demon clan, but unfortunately, Fen Tian has never bothered with it." Just then, Feng Ming, who had never made a sound since entering the space aircraft, suddenly laughed, her beautiful eyes revealing a look of ridicule. "You!" The horse-faced old man blushed slightly, as though he was afraid to argue with Feng Ming, and then looked towards Tang Huan and explained, "Little brother, we were indeed at fault, but we could not blame all of us. No one knew that you and Lady Feng Ming had forced Fen Tian to retreat, and they even thought that you two had been killed by Fen Tian. With so many people crowding here, if we do not think of a way to leave as soon as possible, all of them will eventually die from hunger and thirst." The moment he said this, weak sounds of agreement rose in the surrounding area. "So, you decided to make a move on this kid?" Tang Huan smiled as he glanced at the horse-faced elder and the others, but there was no smile in his eyes. To die from hunger and thirst was just an excuse for Mochi and the others. Although their strength had greatly declined, they were still once Stage 9 martial saint. Even if they had stayed here for 6 or 7 days, they would not have died. Obviously, their real goal was to borrow Zhao Budian's Spirit Dragon Sacred Marrow to heal their injuries. With Spirit Dragon Sacred Marrow, they would be able to recover to their peak strength. Before, with Tang Huan and Feng Ming here, they did not dare have such thoughts. Otherwise, Tang Huan would have definitely noticed it long ago. Now that they felt that the two had been killed by Fen Tian, they started to have no scruples. It was impossible for them to not know that secreting spirit dragon sacred marrow would cause great damage to Zhao Budian, especially with over 20 people here. They would probably need to squeeze Zhao Budian's spirit dragon sacred marrow dry to barely use it. After exhausting all the spirit dragon sacred marrow, Zhao Budian would definitely die. Perhaps they had never thought of killing Zhao Budian, but they knew that such an outcome would occur, yet they still chose to stand by Mochi's side. This is particularly unforgivable. Since you've become an ingrate, you should know that ingrate will not have a good ending. Tang Huan laughed coldly. Just like what Senior Wuzhu said, you guys are not the head of the evil sect, and I will not kill you. Whether or not you can survive will depend on your luck. As he spoke, ripples started to appear in the air above his head. In only an instant, a cyan vortex condensed into shape. Everyone, please. Everyone's face became ashen as they understood Tang Huan's meaning. They backed off unconsciously, their eyes filled with pleadings. Outside of this place was tranquil continent's snowy mountain-splitting land. If they were to leave, with their strength, it would be impossible for them to survive the journey from snowy mountain-splitting land and dark night marsh back to Origin Continent, and they might even be caught by the demon clan very quickly, or even be killed off directly. Feng Ming, send them on their way. Yes. Feng Ming's figure flickered, and with one in each hand, he threw them into the whirlpool. Within the space, cries of shock rose and fell, and in a short while, all 20+ people were thrown out. I think something fell outside. Tang Huan, you'll have to bring me in later. Feng Ming suddenly remembered something, and with a flash of red, he disappeared into the whirlpool. Tang Huan was a little doubtful, but he did not think much about it. In a moment, the vortex in the sky had already dissipated, and with a slight movement of his feet, he arrived at a corner where Uzi was quietly sitting cross-legged. At this time, in the group of people outside the space aircraft, the red shadow was flashing rapidly as it screamed and cursed. When the red figure stopped, revealing Feng Ming's graceful body, the 20-odd people were all lying on the ground, motionless. Fen Tian will neither kill them nor subdue them. He has only imprisoned them in the God-forbidding cave. His true goal is to extract their souls at the critical moment and help him step into the true heavenly domain realm. Since you can't bear to kill them all, let me do it for you. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Feng Ming muttered out loud, and then laughed. Her beautiful face revealed a mischievous look. Even if you knew, you can't blame me. It was you who asked me to send them on their way. I will send them on their way now. It's all in accordance with your wishes. Not long after, the space aircraft floated to a few meters in the air while trembling, and the resplendent green light it emitted quickly turned into a vortex. Feng Ming rose into the air and entered the depths of the whirlpool. Moments later, the space aircraft turned into a green stream of light, shooting straight into the sky. Outside the Dark Shadow City, corpses were strewn all over the ground. As if the battle had just ended, the army of Demon Clan that had rushed over from the direction of the snowy mountain-splitting land, along with the Tian Clan and the others, had carried out an extremely intense battle in the depths of the swamp. This fierce battle had involved more than 200,000 participants for an entire day. In order to recapture the Dark Shadow City, the entire Demon Clan did not care about dying. Unfortunately, the Demon Clan still suffered a great loss in the end. After the battle, the remaining tens of thousands of defeated soldiers ran towards the snowy mountain-splitting land. Moreover, out of the dozen or so Stage 9 Demon Kings, 7 of them had left their lives outside the Dark Shadow City. In this battle, the Demon Clan's losses were extremely heavy. Inside and outside the Dark Shadow City, Human Clan and the rest of the Profound Sky Continent, however, were in jubilation. Whoosh! High in the dark void, a green glow came from the direction of the snowy mountain-splitting land, and like a meteor, it entered the waist of the mountain peak within the Dark Shadow City. Chapter 604, Two Ways. Aunt Xing, why are you in the spacious Savage Palace? Not only did Tang Huan see Shen Guan, Tang Moyang, Shami, Mo Huang and other Human Clan experts, He also saw Tian clan as well as Hai Yan. However, what made Tang Huan feel even more surprised was that the current Xing Meng seemed to be rather tired. Xing Meng was not the only one. Shen Guan, Tang Moyang and Mo Huang's faces were also pale white. Little brother, you don't know this. Shen Guan laughed bitterly. This time, there were a bit of a change. Although the Demon Clan had a lot of Demon Kinges, and most of them were ordinary Stage 9 Demon Kinges, but just as we were about to exterminate them all, a very powerful person suddenly appeared in the Demon Clan, and in a short amount of time, he already severely injured me, Brother Tang, and Brother Mo. Luckily, the Lord appeared in time and beat him back. Tang Huan was surprised. Other than Fen Tian? There is actually such an expert in Demon Clan? That person is not of the Demon Clan. Xing Meng shook his head lightly, and said in a deep voice, according to my judgment, he should be the Hall Master of the secluded Night Divine Palace, and moreover, his real body. Him again. Tang Huan's face slightly darkened. Back then, at the Sword Crafting Valley, that secluded Night Divine Palace Master had sent out a set of embodiment to stir up trouble, but in the end, he was killed by him. That person is powerful, and he is also proficient in assassination techniques, making it hard to guard against him. Xing Meng's expression became a little solemn, and reminded them, for the next period of time, it would be best for all of you to stay together, in case they attack you one by one, affecting the overall situation. Lord Xing Meng is right. Shen Guan, Tang Moyang and the others could not help but nod their heads. Xing Meng's face relaxed, he looked at Tang Huan and chuckled. Tang Huan, on your journey to the Dark Abyss, did you succeed in saving your master? It's saved. Tang Huan laughed. Not only is there my master, there are also seniors who have been imprisoned in the Demon Clan for many years. While speaking, Tang Huan's thoughts moved. The space aircraft beside him started to vibrate, a green light shone, shining brilliantly, and after a moment, a skinny old man appeared. You are Brother Wuzhu, Brother Wuzhu. After a moment of silence, a cry of surprise sounded out from within the Savage Palace. Shen Guan even sprung up like a spring, and hugged the skinny old man. He was extremely excited. Before everyone could calm down, a burly man appeared behind Wuzhu. Are you Brother Yan, Brother Limitless, Senior Yan Wuji? Following that, almost every single figure that appeared would cause an exclamation of disbelief. Very quickly, the news of Wuzhu and the other powerful Stage 9 cultivators who had already disappeared dozens of years ago and even hundreds of years ago being saved by Tang Huan from the Dark Abyss spread. And at this time, there were only a few people left in the Savage Palace. Tang Huan, Feng Ming, Xing Meng and Hai Yan sat facing each other. Between the four of them was Uzi, who looked like a motionless sculpture. As for Wuzhu, Yan Wuji and the others, they had already left the palace with Shen Guan. Tang Huan, your master's condition is extremely serious. Xing Meng's palm lightly touched Uzi's forehead. The dark blue aura seeped out, and instantly covered his entire head. But after a moment, Xing Meng had already raised his hand, his expression serious. His soul has already been completely sealed by Fen Tian, and furthermore, Fen Tian is using his own soul energy. After pausing for a moment, Xing Meng continued, there are only two ways to make your master wake up and recover. The first is to find a person whose soul force far surpasses Fen Tian and forcibly remove his soul force. Tang Huan frowned slightly. In the current small world, no one would be able to use this method, neither he nor Xing Meng. The strength of Fen Tian's soul had already reached an extremely shocking level. Even Tang Huan, who had fused with 108's sword seal, would not dare to claim that his soul was stronger than Fen Tian's, let alone someone far stronger than his. Furthermore, Fen Tian's attainments in the way of the soul could be said to be the number one person in his small world. Aunt Xing, what's the second method? After a short moment, Tang Huan could not help but ask. Kill Fen Tian. Xing Meng softly spat out the four words. Kill him? Tang Huan was startled. Right, kill him, Xing Meng said in a low voice. Once Fen Tian dies, The soul force he used to confine your master's soul will vanish like smoke into thin air. Your master will naturally wake up. Speaking till here, Xing Meng looked at Tang Huan, and said in a low voice, "These two methods are not only effective towards your master, but also towards you. The soul imprint that Fen Tian condensed in your body can only be eliminated by using these two methods." Hearing this, Tang Huan could not help but smile bitterly. The second method, in the current small world, was also something that no one was able to accomplish. Together, he and Xing Meng might be able to defeat Fen Tian, but the possibility of killing him was next to none. If he wanted to kill Fen Tian, he had to become a real heavenly domain level expert. Heavenly domain. Muttering these two words, Tang Huan's eyes suddenly lit up. It was better to beg for oneself than for others. If he could step into the heavenly domain and kill Fen Tian, not only would his master be able to recover, the hidden danger in his body would also be eliminated. However, to do this, it would be best if he could surpass the stage 9 and become a heavenly domain level expert before Fen Tian. Not the best, but the necessary. In a moment, Tang Huan could not help but clench his fists. Fen Tian had now touched the threshold of the heavenly domain, and would likely take the last half step at any time. At that time, no one in this small world would be able to contend against him, and disaster would probably befall himself and his master. Because the soul imprint in his body and the soul energy in his master's body allowed Fen Tian to sense his position with his master at any time. Only by advancing to heavenly domain before Fen Tian would he be able to take the initiative. "Aunt Xing, if I want to break through to the heavenly domain realm, do I have a suitable place to go?" Tang Huan was already feeling angry at the bottom of his heart. "You want to do it yourself?" Xing Meng and Hai Yan were both stunned. "That's right." Tang Huan clenched his teeth. "I have to be ahead of Fen Tian and step into heavenly domain. Once Fen Tian succeeds, I will probably be at his mercy." When Xing Meng heard this, his expression slightly changed. Clearly, he had also realized the difficult situation Tang Huan was currently in. "If you want to step into the heavenly domain realm faster, there is one place you can go. However, that place is extremely dangerous. Even if you have the cultivation of peak stage 9, you can die at any time." After a long while, Xing Meng finally said with some worry as her brows tightly knitted together, "Aunt Xing, what kind of place is that?" Turbid Sea Area. Chapter 605, Turbid Sea Area. The vast ocean seemed endless. Whoosh, thousands of meters in the sky, there were countless soft sounds. The space aircraft dragged a green glow with it as it moved quickly through the sky like a meteor. Inside the space aircraft, Tang Huan sat in front of the round center stage with a solemn expression. In front of an almost transparent wall, Feng Ming was seated cross-legged, and her beautiful face was also filled with a solemn expression. Seeming to have been infected by Tang Huan and Feng Ming, Zhao Budian quietly sat at the side as his large eyes continuously rolled around. Right now, they were on their way to the Turbid Sea Area. At first, Tang Huan only planned to go alone, since it was too dangerous. However, after thinking about it, his master's soul was restricted by Fen Tian's soul force, so whether it was leaving him in the Origin Continent or inside the Glory Continent, it was possible for him to be found. As for Feng Ming, Tang Huan originally wanted her to stay in the continent, but she insisted on going with him, so he could only let her do it in the end. "I think we'll soon reach the storm eddy." Feng Ming suddenly opened her mouth, her voice uncontrollably tinged with an additional sense of nervousness. "I feel it already." Tang Huan squinted as a strange look flashed past his eyes. Just at this moment, he suddenly realized that the space aircraft was already covered by a surge of sucking, and that the force was not considered strong. Obviously the aircraft had only just entered the borders of the sea that the storm eddy could affect. According to what Xing Meng had revealed, the storm eddy was around 100 kilometers in radius, but the surrounding 500 kilometers of sea area were all affected by the vortex energy. Right now, the space aircraft was still 1,000 miles away from the whirlpool. At this time, if he wanted to get rid of the power of the sucking, it would be very easy. However, Tang Huan was not in a rush to avoid the whirlpool. and continued to advance along with the power of the sucking. He wanted to see the storm eddy in front of him, to see just how strong the sucking's power was. This place was not even considered a turbid sea area, and there was only one storm eddy. However, once one entered a true turbid sea area, storm eddy would be one after another. Now that he tried it, he knew what he should do. After he entered the dangerous turbid sea area, he could deal with it more easily. Whoosh! The space aircraft continued to move forward and Tang Huan felt the power of the sucking gradually increase. Thousands of meters below him, the seawater had already started to follow the flow of the whirlpool. After another long moment, the spot where Hai Tian had crossed paths with him suddenly caved in. It was as if a huge, deep pit had suddenly appeared at the bottom of the sea. Countless amounts of seawater spiraled down from the surroundings, forming an abnormally huge whirlpool with an incomparably frightening momentum. The air above the whirlpool seemed to have been stirred up to a terrifying degree as it condensed into a terrifying storm. The water in this area was also half as fast as the sea, and it actually reached up to thousands of meters in the air. Yeah! Zhao Budian pointed to the whirlpool and shouted loudly, "Storm eddy!" Tang Huan and Feng Ming shouted out at the same time. The space aircraft was still at least 100 miles away from the storm eddy, but even from that distance, the storm eddy that was imprinted in their eyes made them tremble in fear. They could not help but be shocked. "Tang Huan, do you want to continue?" Feng Ming swallowed his saliva and looked at Tang Huan subconsciously. Both of his fists were clenched tightly. Zhao Budian opened his mouth wide, his blue eyes looked towards Tang Huan, pinching his two little claws, with a nervous expression on his face. "I can still take it." "Move closer." Tang Huan nodded. At this moment, not only were Feng Ming and Zhao Budian extremely nervous, even Tang Huan himself had a tight grip on the heartstrings. Whoosh! The space aircraft continued to advance. Tang Huan had already consciously slowed down the input of the genuine qi. The space aircraft's speed had initially decreased quite a bit, but following the unceasing increase in the sucking's power, the space aircraft had also gradually increased in speed. In just a dozen breaths of time, it had reached its previous state. The closer they went, the more terrifying the storm eddy was. Unknowingly, Feng Ming's expression had already changed, and even Zhao Budian's eyes were filled with fear. "Let's go!" Tang Huan focused his eyes and suddenly shouted in a low voice. In the next moment, within Tang Huan's Danshan, both the 9-yang divine furnace and the 5 colors spiritual pills had already been operating to their limits. In an instant, the space began to shake violently. Amidst the sound, the aircraft shifted its direction from the north to the east and shot out explosively. In just a short 2 breaths of time, the space aircraft's speed suddenly increased by almost twofold. Feng Ming and Zhao Budian held their breath, not daring to move, afraid that they would disturb Tang Huan. Whoosh! At that moment, Tang Huan did not dare hold anything back. Under his great strength, the space aircraft carried the terrifying power of the sucking and flew quickly. The sound of the sea below them became quieter and quieter, and one could see the distance between the space aircraft and the storm eddy increasing gradually. When the sea recovered its calmness, Feng Ming's tight face finally relaxed, and she quietly moved her neck a few times. Finally out. Tang Huan let out a long sigh of relief. Right now, he had completely gotten rid of the power of the storm eddy, allowing him to feel relieved. Although the process of leaving was smooth, he was very clear on the degree of danger involved. Just now, even if the space aircraft were to continue advancing another 1,000 or even a few hundred meters, the difficulty of Tang Huan controlling it would skyrocket, and it would be even more difficult to shake off the power of the sucking. Looking at the scene in front of him, Tang Huan finally understood why the turbid sea area was so hard to pass through. This storm eddy between the 3 continents, namely Holy Spirit, Origin, and Destruction, could be considered small. It was only around the size of a 100-mile radius, and in the real turbid sea area, there were storm eddy with a radius of 100 kilometers, and even more within a radius of 1,000 kilometers. Even coming close to such a small storm eddy was already so terrifying, let alone those a larger storm eddy. What was even more frightening was that those storm eddy were extremely concentrated, and in that sea realm, space aircraft simply could not fly high into the sky. 10,000 meters in the air was indeed not affected by the storm eddy, but there was an abnormally wild and violent astral wind there. Even if it was a space aircraft, it was possible that it would completely shatter under the astral wind. According to Luo, the reason why the aircraft was harmed was because of the astral winds. Amongst the dangers of the turbid sea area, storm eddy and astral winds were only two of them. Tang Huan, once you enter the real turbid sea area, you can lose your life at any time, and you still insist on going? Feng Ming suddenly laughed. Of course. Tang Huan looked at the tall and sturdy figure of his master in the corner and nodded without hesitation. That day, when Fen Tian sensed his sword soul, she fearfully retreated. However, that did not mean that Fen Tian would always be afraid. If one could not step into heavenly domain, the only road left for them was death. In that case, he might as well take the risk. Chapter 606, Vicious Beasts. Wu Yu Yu Yu. Several days later, in the evening, on an island that had a radius of several miles, an extremely piercing woo-woo sound pierced through the void, directly piercing into the heavens. In the northern part of the island, a strange-looking beast was roaring continuously. In front of him, Tang Huan and Feng Ming had already summoned their divine armament. Between two giant boulders that were hundreds of meters away, Zhao Budian was holding on to space aircraft, sticking his head out and peeking his neck out as he watched. After walking for 2 days while controlling the space aircraft, Tang Huan and Feng Ming finally saw the real turbid sea area, and they entered the border region of turbid sea area. After carefully moving through the storm eddy for half a day, the two of them finally found a place to rest. This island was located between the two storm eddy of the north and the south. Furthermore, the power of the sucking that originated from both sides stopped at a place 50 kilometers away from the island. This was the reason why this island had always existed. However, as soon as the two of them exited the space aircraft, they were discovered by the huge beast. Whether it was Tang Huan or the others, this was the first time they had seen such a vicious beast's appearance. Its mouth was long and pointed, its head was flat, its body was fat like a crocodile, but its body was covered with pitch-black scales. Just then, the front half of the gigantic beast's body was already on the rocks by the shore, while the other half was still in the water. Its bloody mouth had already opened wide for Tang Huan and Feng Ming, its fangs ferocious, saliva was continuously dripping from its mouth, making it look extremely fierce. I'm afraid this beast possesses the strength of the peak stage 9. Tang Huan squinted his eyes and said his strength was not weak when compared to the peak stage 9 beasts like the special devil ape. This caused Tang Huan to grow a sense of vigilance in his heart. The turbid sea area of the fierce beasts was definitely stronger than the ones on a continent. To be able to survive in such a dangerous environment was something that could not be casually compared to. Tang Huan had a feeling that the ferocious beasts here definitely had an unimaginable perception ability. After all, this place was filled with storm eddy. If the perception ability was slightly weaker, then it might be sucked in by the storm eddy and disappear without a trace. Wu Yu Yu Yu. The moment Tang Huan's voice fell, Feng Ming did not even have time to reply before the huge beast roared once again. Immediately, a terrifying aura spread out from its enormous body, which instantly transformed into an extremely violent storm, howling forward as if it wanted to tear Tang Huan and Feng Ming into pieces. Imposing manner? Tang Huan and Feng Ming quickly exchanged glances, their expressions suddenly changing. It was normal for a stage 9 ranker to have an imposing aura, but it was the first time they had seen one with a ferocious beast's imposing aura. If fierce beasts could condense potential, didn't that mean that they would have the chance to step into the heavenly domain as well? However, Tang Huan and Feng Ming did not have much time to think about it. Tang Huan's pupils abruptly shrank and within his mind instructs. In a second, a similarly terrifying storm of aura swept out from his body. Almost at the same time, the Conqueror's spear in his hands released an excited buzzing sound and a brilliant red light exploded outwards, illuminating the surrounding area of several tens of meters. The flame-dancing sword in Feng Ming's hand also buzzed and a red light shot out in all directions. However, she did not attack together with Tang Huan. At this time, she focused her attention on her surroundings to prevent any more vicious beasts from rushing out of the sea. In a split second, the two auras fiercely bombarded each other. Following that, a terrifying wave of energy spread out from the point of collision, creating an even more violent storm. Countless pieces of sand and stones were sent flying high into the air. Kai. Right at this moment, a sharp cry suddenly burst forth. Tang Huan's spear shot out like an angry dragon bursting out of its lair, the blazing flames on the tip of the spear spinning at a rapid speed. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a sharp awl, bringing about an incomparably strong heat wave that shot out explosively. At that time, Tang Huan almost did not hold back at all. For one, he used the spear technique's true flaming rainbow style. Howl! The beast let out a high-pitched cry, and when it was in the air, its thick and long tail had actually swept back, ripping apart the blazing storm, fiercely smashing onto the flaming pointed awl. Instantly, the sound of explosions rang out in the air. Under the attack of the huge beast's long tail, the flaming pointed awl actually exploded into pieces, and the huge beast Peng Shao's body also fell down heavily. After a bang, the island trembled, and sand and rocks scattered in all directions. Tang Huan's heart trembled, his footsteps sped up, and before the figure in front of the huge beast could dissipate, he had already traversed 20 to 30 meters and appeared on the right side of the huge beast. The long spear seemed to have merged with the surrounding space, and with an astonishing speed, it pierced towards the belly of the huge beast. Howl! However, the gigantic beast seemed to have sensed something, and turned its head. Its lantern-like eyeballs stared straight at Tang Huan. Following that, its front paws slammed onto the ground, causing a rock the size of a dustpan to fly up, and pummel Tang Huan hard. Tang Huan's movements changed. The conqueror's spear swept across like a dragon swinging its tail. Bang! The stone immediately crumbled into fine powder, but Tang Huan did not slow down at all. With a light shake of his wrist, the long spear, like a spring, suddenly plunged down, once again stabbing towards the stomach of the gigantic beast. On the tip of the spear, the flames suddenly soared. The heat seemed to be able to melt the space around it. Ho! The beast's long tail lashed out once more. Not only that, it pounced ferociously with its bloody mouth. At that instant, the huge beast's body was bent into a semicircle. A cunning look flashed across Tang Huan's eyes. With a step, his body suddenly appeared next to the gigantic beast's neck. The gigantic beast seemed to have sensed him and wanted to twist its body, but the powerful inertia could not be changed immediately. The afterimages that Tang Huan had left on the ground were still shattered by the gigantic beast's tail. Right at this time, the long spear in Tang Huan's hand pierced through the huge beast's bloody mouth at an angle, and was actually as fast as lightning. Woo-yoo-yoo-yoo. The huge beast screamed as it suddenly closed its mouth. Its sharp fangs had actually firmly stuck onto Tang Huan's conqueror spear, slashing its tail at Tang Huan for the third time. Seeing that, Tang Huan's face darkened. Whoosh! In the next moment, Tang Huan was already in the air, a pair of wings on his back extended outwards at the same time, and below, from the mouth of the beast that was biting onto the conqueror's spear, a dark red flame appeared. It quickly spread, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the entire head of the beast. The gigantic beast seemed to be in extreme pain. Its body bounced up abruptly and crashed down heavily onto the ground, stirring up countless of sand and rocks. The conqueror's spear that was bit in its mouth was also blown away. Then, Tang Huan extended his hand out and grabbed, causing the conqueror's spear to fly into the air like a spirit object, straight into his palm. Chapter 607, Fighting. Woo-yoo-yoo-yoo. A mournful roar resounded through the sky as the gigantic beast suddenly dove into the sea. In the blink of an eye, the surface of the sea began to churn violently. However, the ball of flames did not extinguish. A dazzling red ball could still be seen through the water. Not long after, the red ball of light floated up into the air. At the same time as it floated up to the surface of the sea, there was also the gigantic beast's body. At this moment, the gigantic beast's head had already been completely incinerated, and the flames continued to spread. After about 10 breaths of time, the body of the huge beast, Peng Shao, completely disappeared and the ball of fire gradually melted on the surface of the sea. Tang Huan heaved a sigh of relief, and floated down to the ground. The flesh body of the fierce beasts in the turbid sea area were actually even stronger than the savage heavenly corpses and rocky devil spirits. The same nirvana sacred fire had burnt the bodies of 8 remoteness Dragon King and the others within a moment, and the duration of this fierce beast was at least 3 times longer than theirs. And this was just a random fierce beast he met. The turbid sea area had countless stronger fierce beasts. Suddenly, Tang Huan became a little excited. No wonder the Etching said that if he wanted to step into the heavenly domain realm even faster, he had to came to this turbid sea area. Training in a dangerous place and lingering between life and death was indeed the best way to break through. However, this method was extremely dangerous. From ancient times till now, there were countless stage 9 rankers who came here with the same thought as Tang Huan. However, the number of people who were able to successfully achieve their goals could be counted on one's fingers. The vast majority of them died in this sea. Zhao Budian's body had already returned to normal. Carrying space aircraft, he flew in front of Tang Huan, his 2 little claws slapping his chest, his eyebrows dancing in joy. Tang Huan. Feng Ming also floated over, but before she could finish speaking, her voice suddenly stopped, and a look of doubt flashed in her beautiful eyes. But at this moment, Tang Huan seemed to have sensed something, and his brow slightly rose. Next, we have some work to do. Feng Ming looked at Tang Huan in surprise, then immediately followed with a frown. On the sea surface tens of meters behind Tang Huan, a black figure with a long pointed mouth and a flat head actually appeared, looking exactly the same as the beast that was killed by him just now. Did that fellow's companion come for revenge? Just as this idea surfaced in his mind, Feng Ming's beautiful face immediately changed color. Following after the black figure, one after another, ferocious beasts with similar physiques floated up to the surface of the sea. Feng Ming slightly counted, and within his line of sight, there were more than a dozen of these fierce beasts. So many, Feng Ming could not help but exclaim, but Zhao Budian was stunned, and blankly stared with her pair of deep blue eyes wide open. You see only a small part of it. Tang Huan laughed. Hiss. Feng Ming turned around in understanding, and couldn't help but take in a breath of cold air in the next moment. In an even wider area behind them, there were dozens of long-tongued, flat-tongued beasts gathered together. It looked like a black mass of beasts. There were at least over 100 ferocious beasts in this group. Woo-yoo-yoo-yoo. After a short moment, on the surface of the sea, hundreds of ferocious beasts suddenly opened their bloody mouths and roared at the same time. After a short moment, on the surface of the sea, hundreds of fierce beasts suddenly opened their bloody mouths and roared at the same time. Crash! In the next moment, all of the fierce beasts broke through the surface of the water and landed on the island. They madly rushed towards Tang Huan and Feng Ming, and stomped down with their huge feet. Yeah! Zhao Budian was so frightened that he trembled. He immediately threw away the space aircraft on his back and slipped through the front of Tang Huan's chest like a wisp of smoke. Buzz! Amidst intense trembling sounds, the space aircraft floated to the air above their heads. The resplendent green light it emitted instantly condensed into a long vortex. Zhao Budian, you go in first. Holding Zhao Budian's golden horn, he pulled it out from his chest and threw it into the whirlpool. Feng Ming, bring this thing up there. In the next moment, the vortex disappeared, and Tang Huan handed the space aircraft over to Feng Ming. Tang Huan, what about you? Feng Ming caught the aircraft and asked. Me? Tang Huan laughed loudly, the fighting spirit between his brows flourishing. The reason why I came to Turbid Sea area is to find the opportunity to break through in the face of death. Now that the battle is here, how can I avoid it? Now, I'll properly take care of this group of fierce beasts and see to what extent can they be forced to. Whoosh! Just as he finished speaking, Tang Huan shot forward like an arrow. The conqueror's spear in his hand danced quickly, the flames rapidly expanded. After that, an extremely condensed fireball shot out from the tip of the spear, like a meteorite falling from the sky. it smashed into the fastest ferocious beast. And then, an extremely fierce battle broke out on the island. Wuthering sounds, roars, colliding sounds, shouts, screams. On the island that rose and fell from the sky, smoke and dust billowed as numerous figures rapidly churned. Several hundred meters in the air, Feng Ming held the space aircraft in her hands as she flapped the fiery red wings on her back gently. Her beautiful eyes did not blink as her gaze continuously chased after the familiar figure on the island. Amongst the hundreds of large-sized beasts, Tang Huan was like a ghost as he jumped up and down like a rabbit, quickly moving and jumping. The conqueror's spear in his hands also flew up and down, spinning left and right. This divine armament seemed to have turned into a living being in Tang Huan's palm. The tyrannical power was fully displayed, and from time to time, there were beasts that were swept away by the red lance, and from time to time, a ball of flame would spew out from their bodies. Before long, night had completely fallen. The conqueror's spear in Tang Huan's palm suddenly disappeared without any warning, and on the island, all sorts of attacking methods of the five elements magic appeared. Some were the fire dragon dance, some were the thorny wood forest, and some were the violent waves tsunami. Its power was ferocious, and the battle became even more intense. After a long while, the magical attack disappeared, and Tang Huan's conqueror's spear appeared again. Its long spear was like a dragon. The heat waves were monstrous. Many of the fierce beasts were also roaring, their killing intent boiling. Unknowingly, the island's height continued to drop, and the number of ferocious beasts on the island also gradually decreased. 80, 70, 50. After losing almost half of their companions, the surrounding fierce beasts could no longer hold on. First, they charged into the ocean with 2 or 3 sounds. Then all the remaining fierce beasts abandoned Tang Huan and ran away one after another. In just a few breaths of time, only Tang Huan was left standing proudly on the island that had risen to a radius of several tens of meters. "We finally won," Feng Ming cheered as he swooped down. But right at this moment, Tang Huan suddenly fell to the ground, unmoving. Chapter 608, Red Top Golden Vulture. It was like he was in a trance. Tang Huan seemed to have returned to the time when he had obtained the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics from the Forgotten City's Kaian Khan building. In the depths of Tang Huan's soul, the green, white, red and black colored auras converged together and formed a ball of yellow aura. The azure color represented the azure dragon, white was the white tiger, red was the vermilion bird, and black was the black tortoise. The azure dragon was the wood, the white tiger was the gold, and the vermilion bird was the fire, and the black tortoise was the water. This was the merging of the 4 images into one, turning them into primal chaos. The scene of the 4 images blending flashed by again and again. After an unknown period of time, Tang Huan finally opened his eyes again. The first thing that entered his eyes was shockingly that Feng Ming's face that was like a flower and jade. However, her dimples were currently filled with anxiety and worry. "Tang Huan, you're finally awake." Seeing that Tang Huan had woken up, Feng Ming immediately let out an exceptionally happy cry, as the anxious expression on her face was completely gone. "How long have I been asleep?" Tang Huan suddenly flipped over and sat up. In the blink of an eye, he sized up the surroundings and discovered that he was right in front of an extremely irregular inside the cave. The outside of the cave was very high, but the inside was very low. It had a slope of a few meters. Tang Huan and Feng Ming were now at the bottom of the cave. 5 days and 5 nights. Feng Ming raised 5 of his fingers. "That long?" Tang Huan was shocked. "This doesn't seem to be the original island." "Of course not," Feng Ming said snappily. "After being tormented by you and those vicious beasts for so long, the sea surface area has been reduced by at least 70%, and there are corpses of ferocious beasts everywhere. If he continued to stay there, he might attract even more powerful people. After you fall, I will fly with you for half a day before finally finding an island that is between the crevices of Storm Eddy. However, this place is even more dangerous than the island previously." Saying that, Feng Ming could not help but let out a bitter laugh. "Why?" Hearing that, Tang Huan could not help but be startled. "You'll know when you see for yourself." Feng Ming raised his hand and pointed outside the cave. Tang Huan puzzledly stood up and crawled to the cave entrance. Upon closer look, he could not help but take a deep breath. The cave was located on a cliff that was 100 meters high, and on the beach a kilometer away from the cliff, there were groups of large and small golden figures crawling about. They were obviously birds of prey, and even though they did not make any movements at this time, Tang Huan did not think that they were dead objects. Tang Huan did not need to count to know that there were at least 1,000 flying beasts there. The ones with large bodies should have already reached adulthood, up to several hundred. They were several times more powerful than the group of fierce beasts they encountered a few days ago. To be able to grow up in a dangerous place like the turbid sea area, these birds of prey would definitely not be weaker than the sea beasts. "These are the red-top golden vulture." Feng Ming's rather helpless voice came from the bottom of the cave. "They all go out to look for food in the evening. They have almost returned in the morning, and I arrived at this place just as they were about to leave the island. These few days, I also thought about leaving while they were searching for food, but since I don't have a good place to go, I was worried that I would encounter them. So I didn't dare to act rashly." "Red-top golden vulture," Tang Huan muttered softly as he slipped back into the cave. "I have once seen two fierce beasts of this age in the tranquil continent's endless ruins. Each of them had the strength comparable to a stage 9 demon king. In here, a mature red-top golden vulture would definitely be even more powerful, and would be comparable to a peak stage 9 demon king." Feng Ming said faintly. "Tang Huan, you can't be thinking of fighting them again this time, right?" "How is this possible?" Tang Huan laughed. "I am here to gain experience, not to send myself to my death." If there were only 100 or so red-top golden vulture, he could give it a try, but there were at least a few hundred adult red-top golden vulture here. If they still charged out to fight with them like a few days ago, then he would be no different from a fool. Practicing life and death in a life and death situation was not tantamount to courting death. In the fierce battle a few days ago, the speed at which Tang Huan's 9 Yang Divine Furnace operated had once again surpassed his limits. Thus, he finally fainted. Not only did he recover his full strength, the side effects of the 9 Yang Divine Furnace's overdrive was also completely gone. Most importantly, after he woke up, Tang Huan realized that there was a miraculous change in his Danshan. This kind of change in the 5 colors spiritual pills had happened once before, after the battle with Fentian. However, it wasn't as obvious as this time. Tang Huan knew that this was definitely the effect of the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics. This also allowed Tang Huan to understand one thing: making the 9 Yang Divine Furnace operate at a speed that exceeded his own limits could speed up the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics cultivation. This also made Tang Huan eager to continue fighting like he did a few days ago. Maybe after a few more times, he would be able to successfully cultivate the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics. "That's good." Feng Ming heaved a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. "We will enter the space aircraft first, and wait for them to go out at night to look for food, then we can leave." Sunlight gradually slipped out of the cave, and without realizing it, the inside the cave had become drowsy. Outside the cave, the sky had also darkened. Screech, screech. At first, there were only a few red-top golden vulture calling out, but after a moment, hundreds of red-top golden vulture began calling out at almost the same time. The sharp sound wave shot up to the sky, as if it could pierce through the blue dome of heaven. Not long after, the concentrated sounds of the wailing gradually disappeared into the distance. After a while, the night sky had completely fallen, and in the depths of that pitch-black cave, a green ball hidden between the cracks of the rocks suddenly flickered, emitting an intense trembling sound. In an instant, an exceptionally bright green luster exploded forth, illuminating the entire cave. Whoosh! In the next moment, the ball of the green light had already turned into a streak of light, rushing out of the cave and into the dark sky. Inside the space aircraft, Tang Huan pressed both of his hands on the center of the round platform, while his two eyes passed through the transparent wall and paid close attention to the situation outside. After circling around the island, Tang Huan had already chosen a direction and flew away with the aircraft. However, before even a quarter of an hour had passed, Tang Huan and Feng Ming's expressions changed. In the night sky to their left, a golden figure had actually whizzed over, and in that golden area, there were striking red dots mixed in. The red-top golden vulture that had not been gone for long, had actually come back. Chapter 609, Undersea World. Red-top golden vulture, what's going on? Feng Ming could not help but exclaim. Yeah. Zhao Budian was also shocked. Our space aircraft should not be attacked by any attacks, right? Tang Huan frowned. He did not immediately turn back, and instead stopped in midair. Turning around and avoiding this might even arouse their curiosity. The speed of the red-top golden vulture had reached an extreme, and even compared to the speed of the space aircraft, they were not any slower. In just a short moment, the distance between the two sides had been reduced by almost half, and the appearances of the red-top golden vulture at the very front could faintly be seen. Their bodies were huge, and their wings were at least 10 meters long. Other than the bulbous crown on their heads, which revealed a bright red color, the feathers on their bodies, their feet, and even their mouths were shining with a golden luster, which was exceptionally eye-catching under the night sky. Moments later, more red-top golden vulture began to howl as they flew in from the left and right, bringing about waves of unusually violent gales. In just 10 short breaths of time, all the red-top golden vulture had already flown away. From beginning to end, the space aircraft was not attacked. They seemed to be running for their lives. Feng Ming suddenly spoke out, her beautiful eyes revealing a look of doubt. Indeed, Tang Huan subconsciously nodded his head. Just now, every single red-top golden vulture he saw had eyes that seemed to be filled with panic. Some of the adult red-top golden vulture even had some little fellows lying on their backs. 2 pairs of eyes pierced through the transparent wall and looked in the direction where the red-top golden vulture had escaped from. Tang Huan's heart was filled with suspicions. Yeah. After a short while, Zhao Budian started to shout anxiously, her 2 little claws gesturing non-stop, as though she was urging Tang Huan to leave. Seeing that, Tang Huan's heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously looked at Feng Ming, then looked at him again. Zhao Budian was extremely strong against the dangerous perception ability. Even though it was inside the space aircraft, the moment danger arrived, regardless of whether it came from inside or outside of the space, it would still give off a warning sign. The last time it was in this space, the reason it was grabbed by Mochi was because Mochi's evil idea came too suddenly, causing it to be unable to react in time. And now, Zhao Budian could clearly sense the danger. What's that? Feng Ming's beautiful eyes suddenly became round. Tang Huan's brows slightly jumped, and his pupils suddenly shrank. At the end of his line of sight, there seemed to be a black tornado sweeping towards him. It filled the entire sky, and wherever it passed, the sea waves were at least 1,000 meters tall. At the moment, inside the space aircraft there was no sound at all, but outside, the tornado had stirred up a terrifying commotion. At this moment, Tang Huan could already feel an extremely strong pulling force, as if it was going to drag the space aircraft over. Let's go. Tang Huan no longer hesitated. In between mind instructs, in a second, an even more majestic genuine chi was injected into the center of the round platform. In an instant, the space aircraft had already turned around and chased after the group of red-top golden vulture. In this turbid sea area, as a native, was much more familiar with the surrounding area than Tang Huan. It would be safer to follow their escape routes. Whoosh! The space aircraft's speed had already reached its limit, and not long later, that gold light once again appeared in front of Tang Huan's eyes. However, the suction force that swept over from behind was still there, showing that the black tornado was also gradually increasing its speed. Those red-top golden vulture also seemed to have noticed and flew even more desperately. Tang Huan quickly discovered that they were not heading to the island they had previously lived on. Although he was a little surprised in his heart, Tang Huan still followed closely behind. Not long later, Tang Huan closed the distance between them by dozens of meters. However, at this moment, the red-top golden vulture at the very front suddenly dove down from the sky. When they were still 10 meters away from the sea surface, they retracted their wings, straightened their bodies, and like arrows, they smashed into the sea. In an instant, they were covered by the seawater and disappeared without a trace. The red-top golden vulture behind him also followed suit. In the blink of an eye, all the red-top golden vulture had fallen into the sea. What are they doing? Feng Ming was extremely suspicious. Yeah? Zhao Budian also opened his mouth wide in shock, his dark blue eyes widening even wider. Tang Huan was also surprised, but that red-top golden vulture definitely did not commit suicide by throwing themselves into the ocean. They would definitely do so for their own reasons. Therefore, just like the red-top golden vulture before him, the space aircraft only paused for a moment before diving into the sea. The seawater surged. The resistance was extremely strong. The aircraft's speed immediately decreased by quite a bit. Fortunately, even after entering the pitch-black sea, one could still see the golden figures in front of them. The group of red-top golden vulture continued to dive deeper. However, after a short while, Tang Huan and Feng Ming surprisingly realized that the golden figures were disappearing one by one. Without hesitation, Tang Huan controlled the space aircraft and followed it. After a flick of a finger, Tang Huan felt as if the aircraft had entered a whirlpool. Tang Huan greatly reduced the input of the genuine qi, and no longer forcefully controlled the aircraft to resist the pulling force of the vortex. In the next moment, the space aircraft had already started to spin according to the vortex. Inside the cyan space, Tang Huan, Feng Ming and the others also began to quickly spin. In the blink of an eye, several hours passed. Tang Huan suddenly felt the aircraft lighten, and the pulling force around it suddenly disappeared. Evidently, it had already charged out of the whirlpool. Yeah? After a short moment, Zhao Budian cried out in surprise. At this moment, in the world outside the space aircraft, the darkness had already been replaced by daylight. What appeared before Tang Huan's eyes was no longer the endless ocean water, but instead an endless expanse of green. It was actually a forest. Golden figures could be seen in the sky above the forest. They should be the group of red-top golden vulture that entered earlier. Tang Huan and Feng Ming exchanged looks of surprise. Luofu world. The next moment, the two of them said the two words at the same time. Tang Huan and Feng Ming had obviously thought of the same thing, and there was a high possibility that this place was an independent space like the Luofu world. Yeah. Abruptly, Zhao Budian's anxious voice roused Tang Huan and Feng Ming from their stupor. In the blink of an eye, they looked over, only to see the red-top golden vulture pouncing towards them from the front. Chapter 610, Danger. This is bad. Tang Huan's face sunk. Just as he was about to increase the distance, he felt the space aircraft sink. It was obvious that it had suffered an attack from the red-top golden vulture. Without waiting for Tang Huan to stabilize himself, the space aircraft rushed forward again. This attack came from behind. Immediately after, a curved beak like a red-top golden vulture in front back over, and the space aircraft that had just charged a few dozen meters away immediately shot backwards. Yeah? In the cyan space, Zhao Budian couldn't stand steadily either. He immediately jumped onto Tang Huan's shoulder and hugged his neck tightly with his two little claws. However, Tang Huan frowned and laughed bitterly. Outside, the red-top golden vulture treated the space aircraft as a toy and pecked it all over the place. Inside the aircraft, Tang Huan could only see ahead. He was completely unaware of the situation around him, and under such circumstances, his extremely strong perception ability did not have any place of use either. It was impossible for him to dodge the pecking blows of the red-top golden vulture. Tang Huan's brows furrowed even tighter. It had only been a little while, and his expression had already become rather unsightly. Even though this space aircraft had already been repaired by Tang Huan, due to the lack of the most important materials, Its stability was completely incomparable to before. This was the reason why it no longer possessed the ability to traverse the turbid sea area and could only roam around the borders of this sea. The pecking from the red-top golden vulture outside was always heavy and powerful. It was fine for a short period of time, but if it continued for too long, the aircraft would definitely collapse. The most troubling thing was that these space aircraft were not divine armament like Conqueror Spear S and Flame-Dancing Sword S. They did not have the ability to attack, although when activated with full strength, they could rely on their shocking speed to attack, allowing them to do so with terrifying killing intent. The killing power was mutual. If he killed a few red-top golden vulture that were comparable to peak stage 9 rankers, this space aircraft would probably be repaid. Feng Ming, you and Zhao Budian stay inside. I'll go take a look. When the aircraft descended again, Tang Huan immediately made a decision. He handed Zhao Budian over to Feng Ming, and in the next moment, the top of the cyan space started to fluctuate rapidly like ripples. Be careful, Feng Ming warned her. This time, she did not request to go out with them. If it were only a few dozen red-top golden vulture, she could still help out by following them. However, there were 1,000 red-top golden vulture outside. Yeah, Zhao Budian's head was nodding like a chicken pecking rice. Don't worry, killing those red-top golden vulture outside is unlikely. However, escaping isn't a big problem. Tang Huan laughed heartily. Almost at the same time he finished speaking, his figure had already risen into the air and disappeared within this cyan-colored space. Without even a blink of an eye, Tang Huan's figure had already appeared in the sky above the forest while condensing a pair of wings on his back. All the surrounding red-top golden vulture were stunned, seeing this uninvited guest who seemed to appear out of nowhere. All of their golden eyes were filled with astonishment. The red-top golden vulture who was closest to the aircraft and was stretching his neck and mouth to touch it was even more shocked. However, Tang Huan did not hesitate at all. He grabbed onto the space aircraft and shot it towards the forest like an arrow that had been shot from a bow. Screech, screech. In an instant, the many red-top golden vulture seemed to have awoken from a dream as the sharp cries became one, as if they were about to stab holes into the sky. Immediately, one golden figure after another rushed down from Tang Huan's back. Those golden eyes were filled with a human-like anger. Tang Huan's speed was unbelievably fast. After a moment, he had already disappeared into the forest, his two wings dissipating at the same time. Tang Huan's footsteps did not pause at all, as he continued to advance in the mysterious rhythm. In the next moment, Tang Huan's true body had already appeared several tens of meters in front of him, and it was also at this time that an intense storm was set off behind him. It was obvious that the red-top golden vulture had caught up. The strong wind whistled, and the crackling sounds were like thunder, rising and falling, the leaves flying, the trees falling, the forest below red-top golden vulture. Everything turned into chaos in an instant. Whoosh! Tang Huan moved through the forest like a bolt of lightning. At this moment, Tang Huan's speed had already reached its limit. The dim light did not affect him in the slightest, and was practically running non-stop. Behind him, a huge commotion was constantly following him, and red-top golden vulture was completely infuriated as sharp bird cries sounded out one after another. Both sides continued to chase at breakneck speed. After a short while, they had already traveled several hundred li. Wherever they went, those towering ancient trees that had been growing for countless years all suffered. The obstructions from the trees still had an effect on the red-top golden vulture as the distance between the two parties quietly widened to over 100 meters. Once again, he rushed up the short mountain ridge. Suddenly, he saw many humongous peaks appearing in his line of sight. In between the mountain ranges, the terrain was much more complex, and it was easier to get rid of the group of red-top golden vulture behind them than in the forest. As long as he could get out of their sight, Tang Huan could find a chance to completely hide his chi, and completely shake them off. Tang Huan's body was like a stream of light, and in a short period of time, he had already traversed several thousand meters of forest and entered the midst of the mountain peaks. But just at this moment, Tang Huan was stunned. He suddenly realized that the loud noise that was created by the red-top golden vulture had disappeared without him realizing it. Turning his head to look, he saw that 1,000 meters away, the group of red-top golden vulture that was flying close to the forest had already ascended to the sky and were circling around continuously. However, none of them continued to fly forward, as if there was a thick and invisible barrier that blocked all of them. In that moment, a sense of warning rose up in Tang Huan's heart. Almost as if he had a conditioned reflex, he turned his head around, and his perception ability rose to the limit in an instant. Roar! A moment later, a roar suddenly burst out from the mountain peaks, as if some huge beast had suddenly awoken from its slumber. The sound was faint at first, but it became stronger and stronger. After about 2 to 3 breaths of time, the roar was earth-shattering, as if it was going to split the sky. High up in the sky, the group of red-top golden vultures suddenly turned around at the same time, flying towards the direction they had come from, and didn't dare to stay for even a moment longer. Tang Huan did not sense the escape of the red-top golden vulture. His eyes stared straight ahead as he sensed an extremely dangerous aura. Chapter 611, Pterosaur. Whoosh! A loud sound could be heard from the front, and the next moment, a strong stench filled the air, causing everyone to feel nauseous. Tang Huan raised his brows slightly, and a pair of wings condensed and formed on his back between his mind and Strux. In a second, with just a light pat, Tang Huan passed through the gaps between the leaves above him, and floated 100 meters in the air. At almost the same time, hundreds of meters in front of him, an abnormally large black figure rose. It was actually a huge dragon. Its mouth was slightly open, and its sharp fangs were faintly discernible. Its pair of round dark green eyes flickered with a cruel and bloodthirsty cold light. The colossal dragon's body was covered in black scales, and behind its malevolent head, sharp spikes pierced through the back of its neck like sharp swords, extending all the way to its tail. The most astonishing thing was that there was a pair of enormous wings on the back of the enormous dragon. Pterosaur. Tang Huan's mind trembled, and his pupils contracted. He did not expect that there would be such a huge monster hidden in this place. Just from the movement it showed just now, Tang Huan knew that its strength definitely surpassed any of the spiritual beast he had encountered in the past. Whether it was the three-heads dragon wolf, amethyst king snake that he had encountered in the past in the Luofu world, or the red-top golden vulture that he had chased after, they were all difficult to match. Even amongst the experts of the 3 clans in the small world, there were very few who could be compared to them. No wonder those red-top golden vulture were scared away. When he flew up into the air, Tang Huan discovered that the group of red-top golden vulture had already escaped cleanly. However, Tang Huan did not follow them, and before he even saw the pterosaur, he knew that he was already locked on. Roar! Suddenly, the pterosaur roared once again. Pang Shao suddenly flapped his wings, and like a ray of light, he tore through the air, shooting over like lightning, and actually dragging behind him numerous afterimages. So fast, Tang Huan's heart skipped a beat. The speed of that pterosaur greatly exceeded his expectations. In the blink of an eye, it was still several hundred meters away, but in the blink of an eye, the distance between them had been shortened to only a few dozen meters. Heavenly Domain? Tang Huan's expression changed slightly as the 2 characters flashed across his mind. His body was instantly enveloped by the black chi. At this moment, Tang Huan seemed to have returned to the moment when he looked like a demon Lord Fentian. The surrounding world seemed to have turned into a cage as the feeling of being bound involuntarily rose. The pterosaur had already surpassed the stage 9 and stepped into the realm of the heavenly domain. If Tang Huan was not wrong, this pterosaur did not seem to be a fake heavenly domain that only had the heavenly domain's intent, but a real heavenly domain. However, this black heavenly domain did not seem to be particularly stable. It could be seen that this pterosaur had just stepped into this realm. But even so, the strength of this pterosaur was most likely above Fentian's. Tang Huan's face immediately became serious. He immediately understood that he had greatly underestimated the pterosaur. Not only was the pterosaur extremely powerful, its speed was extremely fast, and even if he ran, it would not take long for him to catch up. even if he used space aircraft S. Since he couldn't escape, he would have to fight. In the blink of an eye, countless thoughts flashed past Tang Huan's mind. In the next moment, a dark red light flashed, and the Conqueror's spear appeared in Tang Huan's palm. The 5-color spiritual pills was activated to the extreme at the same time, and the 9-yang divine furnace started to revolve at an unprecedented speed, forcibly resisting the restraining force produced by the black heavenly domain. Its body instantly retreated a few meters, and threw the space aircraft in its hands to the forest below. Roar! The pterosaur seemed to be surprised, but his reaction was not slow at all. He was actually following him like a shadow, enveloping Tang Huan within once again. Evil creature! With a berserk roar, the Conqueror's spear in Tang Huan's hands thrusted out like lightning. On the surface of the long spear, flames danced rapidly, and the several meters long spear light shot out from the tip of the spear like a streak of fiery red light. A hint of ridicule flashed through Pterosaur's dark green eyes. With a flick of his finger, a sphere of black chi shot out from the bloody mouth, ruthlessly smashing into the fiery red spear light. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! Amidst the intense ringing sounds, the black aura and the fire red spear radiance actually exploded at the same time, transforming into a powerful strength chi that wreaked havoc wildly. It was also at almost the same time that the pterosaur flapped its wings, pounced forward, and a fierce wind instantly howled forth. Pang Shao's body was already less than 20 meters away from Tang Huan, and his long tail immediately lashed out, radiating an incomparably terrifying energy fluctuation, with a power that was like a thunderbolt that struck with an unstoppable force. Tang Huan's face congealed, and he quickly stepped on it. Ho! With a sweep of the long tail, Tang Huan's figure instantly vanished into thin air. Kai! At this moment, Tang Huan's figure appeared above the pterosaur. The Conqueror's spear pierced forward once again, and the flame above the spear tip began to spiral rapidly, transforming into a cone that poured down. In an instant, it traveled across the space of a few meters, straight to the pterosaur's head. Roar! The pterosaur had already detected Tang Huan's attack, and his mouth issued a sky-shaking roar. Almost at the same time, the black heavenly domain seemed to have a life of its own as it started to undulate rapidly. An extremely strong binding power swept over from all directions, bit by bit delaying the attack from the sky. Even though the flaming pointed all still landed on the pterosaur's head in the end, its power had been greatly reduced. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! With a cry, pterosaur's head suddenly dropped, but his thick and long tail simply flipped upwards, and lashed towards Tang Huan once again. With a violent whistling sound, Tang Huan's figure once again dissipated into thin air, and his body seemingly moved above one of the pterosaur's wings at the same time. Kai! The long spear was like a dragon as the sharp spear tip pierced down once again. The spear just now had only caused a few cracks to appear on one of the scales, but the pterosaur's wings were unlike the other parts of its body. They were also covered with hard scales. If the spear had struck its head, it might have been able to cause even more damage. At the top of the spear point, a captivating red spear light had already been spat out. However, this time, Tang Huan did not push the spear light out like he did before, but instead used the divine armament to stab downwards crazily, its sharpness peerless. Roar! The pterosaur cried out. His wings contracted as the black heavenly domain once again fluctuated violently. Following that, Tang Huan felt an incomparable resistance. As the Conqueror's spear continued to sink, the spear tip that was spewed out from the tip of the spear began to crumble at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. Chapter 612, A Turning Point. In a split second, the spear light had completely vanished. However, the Conqueror's spear still landed at the end of the pterosaur's left wing. With a lightning-fast speed, the sharp spear tip penetrated through it in an instant. When the spear went in and out, it left a hole on pterosaur's wing. The blazing flames that lingered around the spear tip also stuck onto it like maggots on the bones of the legs, burning fiercely. In an instant, the originally fist-sized hole had expanded by several times, and was already as big as an ocean bowl. Roar! The pterosaur was furious to the extreme. Pang Shao suddenly turned his body, and a thick black chi surged out from his left wing like a violent storm, covering that ball of flames. At almost the same time, his long tail swept backwards, sweeping towards Tang Huan with lightning speed. After a moment, the figure had already disappeared into thin air, but Tang Huan appeared tens of meters away. At this time, the serious look in Tang Huan's eyes became even more intense. After the ball of flame on Pterosaur's left wing was covered, not only did it stop spreading, it also rapidly weakened. Not long later, that vague red color disappeared within the black aura. As expected of the heavenly domain fierce beasts, they were actually able to extinguish the Nirvana sacred fire. Roar! Pterosaur swatted his wings. The black chi condensed into a terrifying storm and roared towards Tang Huan, as though it wanted to shatter the space itself. Tang Huan's footsteps were swift, and after leaving behind an afterimage, his body actually appeared under the pterosaur's abdomen. During this teleportation, Tang Huan and Pterosaur were even closer to each other. The distance between the two was less than 2 meters. Kai. The long spear was like an arrow that left the bow as it shot upwards. The pterosaur seemed to have sensed something, and with a flap of its wings, Peng Shao's body started to float rapidly. The black heavenly domain once again gave birth to a strong resistance as layers and layers of resistance wrapped around the conqueror's spear. Tang Huan roared out explosively. The genuine chi stirred, and the pike forcefully stared at the layers of suppressing obstructing force, traveling through a few meters of space, and the pike tip immediately dropped onto the pterosaur's abdomen along with an incomparably sharp tip. Although the scales on the surface of Pterosaur were tough, it was still difficult to defend against the sharpness of the divine armament. Amidst the sounds of fierce collisions, the tip of the conqueror's spear had already shattered a scale and drilled into the pterosaur's body. Roar! Immediately after, the pterosaur cried out in pain. Not only did he not rise up to escape the scorching heat of the spear, but the muscles around his wound began to twitch and squirm, clamping onto the spearhead tightly. Tang Huan's spear succeeded. He immediately grabbed onto the spear's hilt and pulled, and was preparing to teleport away again, but what surprised him was that the spear tip had only appeared out of nowhere. This is bad. Tang Huan immediately had a bad premonition. Indeed, in that instant of delay, Pterosaur's tail whipped over ferociously, causing a whistling sound that seemed to be able to tear one's eardrums. By this time, it was already too late for Tang Huan to use Visional Phoenix 5 footwork and space moving. With a thought, the boundless genuine chi roared out, and a layer of the genuine chi's barrier condensed on his back. At almost the same time, Tang Huan's body also seemed to have a layer of golden luster that was flowing on the surface of his body. Bang! In less than the blink of an eye, the long tail had already slammed onto the genuine chi barrier. Amidst an earth-shaking ringing sound, the genuine chi barrier instantly shattered, and Pterosaur's thick and long tail only paused for a moment before it once again smashed onto Tang Huan's back, moving as fast as a shooting star. Tang Huan was immediately thrown out uncontrollably, like a kite with its string cut. The conqueror's spear in his hand was brought out as well, and the dark red flame once again rose from the wound on Pterosaur's abdomen. Once again, a sizzling sound came out from within the heaven and earth, but when the strong black chi surged in from the surroundings, the flames had already quickly extinguished, and the barbecue-like sound had also disappeared. Dozens of meters away, Tang Huan finally regained control of his body, but his footsteps did not slow in the slightest. He immediately used both the Visional Phoenix 5 footwork and space moving. Roar! The moment Tang Huan's true body disappeared, Pterosaur's ferocious bloody mouth pounced on him and swallowed the afterimage of Tang Huan. Not far from Pterosaur, Tang Huan's figure flashed rapidly. Only now did he have the time to take a deep breath and push down the blood pressure that was rapidly churning in his body. However, his face couldn't help but flush like a drunkard. Even with the genuine chi barrier and the sun spirit body resisting it, that tail attack from Pterosaur almost caused him to vomit blood. The attacks of the heavenly domain fierce beasts were not so easily endured. It was fortunate that he had the sun spirit body, otherwise, he would have been reduced to a meat patty. With the previous example, Tang Huan became even more cautious. In the blink of an eye, he teleported again, dodging the pterosaur's extremely nimble pouncing bite, and appeared in the air above him. However, the pterosaur seemed to have figured out a pattern as her reaction was extremely sharp. Without waiting for Tang Hua to attack, her back suddenly dropped, but her head had already turned around at an extremely fast speed as she opened her mouth wide and spat out a ball of extremely condensed black chi. Ho! Tang Huan's long spear was like a divine dragon flicking its tail, thrusting towards the black ball. The dark red spear light carried a monstrous heat wave as it whizzed out. But before the two even touched, Tang Huan had a feeling. His real body flashed again, and dodged the long tail that was swinging back almost at the same time. Boom! Amidst an explosive sound, the strength chi rippled and a storm raged. The spear beam, the black ball, and the afterimage that Tang Huan left behind all disappeared into thin air. At this time, Tang Huan, who was several tens of meters away from the pterosaur, was frowning deeply. Within the black heavenly domain, the genuine chi in Tang Huan's body was passing away like water. The rate at which it was being consumed had reached an extremely unimaginable rate. In just a short span of a few breaths, Tang Huan had already exhausted all of his genuine chi. If the genuine chi can't be used, then we will switch to the mind power. Tang Huan didn't hesitate at all. In a flash, the Conqueror's spear disappeared from the center of his palms, but right after, the 10 fingers on his hands started to flutter rapidly. An instant later, 5 huge fire dragons formed in front of him, spiraling and roaring upwards with astonishing might. Roar! Pterosaur turned his body, his wings flapping fiercely. A terrifying black storm swept out. In a split second, the 5 fire dragons had been installed. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! A strength chi that could cause people's hearts to palpitate wildly spread out, and the air within a radius of a few dozen meters violently fluctuated. Tang Huan unhesitatingly shifted once more, his hands moving without any delay. But when the extremely sharp wooden spikes shot out one after another from pterosaur's stomach, his eyes couldn't help but light up, and black heavenly domain, who had enveloped him and pterosaur, started to shake. Chapter 613. Get the hell out of here. This beast could not hold its heavenly domain any longer. When Tang Huan stood inside the heavenly domain, no matter if it was launching an attack or using space moving, the speed at which his strength was being consumed would drastically increase. But when the pterosaur activated and maintained the heavenly domain, it would also consume a huge amount of energy at all times. As time passed, the heavenly domain would find it hard to continue. Seeing the current situation of the pterosaur, it seemed like it would collapse very soon. Boom! Pterosaur Peng Shuo suddenly turned his body, and his thick and long tail swept out. Everywhere it passed, there was an endless rumbling sound, and the wooden spikes exploded one by one. At the same time, the black heavenly domain shook even more violently. Seeing that, Tang Huan's spirit was immediately shaken. His 10 fingers moved swiftly, the holy ranked incantation was executed consecutively, and earth-shattering sounds were released one after another. Roar! After such a long period of time, he was still unable to deal with Tang Huan, and the pterosaur had already become extremely irritable, the sounds of his roars resonating throughout the sky. Pa! Not long after, the sounds of bubble shattering suddenly rang out, and the spherical black heavenly domain suddenly disappeared into nothingness. Just as Tang Huan made the space moving appeared on the right side of pterosaur, he immediately felt his entire body relax. In an instant, the strong feeling of restriction that heavenly domain gave off disappeared, as if all the heavy shackles that were pressing down on him had been taken away. Roar! Without waiting for Tang Huan to continue launching attacks, the pterosaur glared at Tang Huan hatefully and roared as he turned around and left. Although his eyes were filled with unwillingness, they did not show any signs of stopping. In just the blink of an eye, Pterosaur had disappeared without a trace from Tang Huan's eyes. Leaving just like that? Tang Huan stared blankly at him for a while before regaining his senses. Although the pterosaur could not sustain heavenly domain now, it was still far from the point where its oil lamp had dried up. However, he did not expect it to leave so straightforwardly. However, other than the unexpected, Tang Huan also couldn't help but feel relieved. If this battle continued, it would not take long before the mind power would be exhausted too. At that time, the recovery rate of the genuine Qi would not even reach 20%. If the battle had lasted just a little bit longer, he might have exhausted all of his energy and lost his life. This time, the conflict with the pterosaur could be said to have ended with great luck. Just as Tang Huan let out a light breath, a strong sense of dizziness hit him, and he almost fell down. He immediately shook his head, barely managing to stabilize his body, but right after, an extremely tired and weak feeling surged out from the depths of his soul. Tang Huan knew that this was the side effect of using Nine Yang Divine Furnaces excessively, so he did not dare delay any further. Very quickly, Tang Huan found the space aircraft he had thrown down before. The green whirlpool appeared quickly, and Tang Huan's body entered it in a flash. The space aircraft was completely silent. Feng Ming and Zhao Budian kept pacing back and forth, their eyes filled with worry. A long time had passed since he was besieged by the red-top golden vulture, yet Tang Huan still had not returned, so he did not know how the situation was. Yeah! Suddenly, Zhao Budian seemed to have sensed something, and exclaimed in surprise, "Tang Huan, you!" Feng Ming looked over in a blink of an eye, and finally a familiar figure appeared in her line of sight, causing her to be unable to restrain her joy. But before she finished speaking, she forcibly swallowed the voice that came from behind. Zhao Budian, who was running towards Tang Huan like a wisp of smoke, also stopped in his tracks immediately. After a while, the wall in front of the aircraft had started to turn transparent, and the scene of the outside world could be clearly seen. Under Tang Huan's control, the space aircraft passed through the forest quickly. In a few breaths' time, it had drilled into a dense patch of vines, causing the outside world to turn pitch black. Seeing that, Feng Ming and Zhao Budian could not help but stare with wide eyes. Their expressions were all surprised. But before they could figure out what was going on, the wall that was almost transparent solidified once again, and following that, a plop sound rang out. Feng Ming and Zhao Budian hurriedly looked over, to see that Tang Huan was lying on the ground, with his eyes closed, motionless, as though he had fallen asleep. Suddenly, just like the time when Tang Huan fainted after his fierce battle with the fierce beasts, the four images of fused together appeared again and again in the depths of his soul. With every passing moment, Tang Huan's perception of the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics seemed to deepen a bit, and his own imposing manner seemed to grow stronger along with it. It felt like his finger had flicked for an instant, and it felt like several days had passed before Tang Huan finally broke free from that wondrous state, and his consciousness gradually recovered once more. At this moment, the bottom of Tang Huan's heart suddenly had a hint of understanding. Fierce battle with the sea beasts, war with the pterosaur. In the battle before and after, the circulation of the Nine Yang Divine Furnace within Tang Huan's Danshan exceeded the limits of his body time and time again. This kind of increase, although brought a huge after effect to Tang Huan, also caused his strength to continuously increase, especially when the side effects broke out. Tang Huan's soul entered a chaotic state, as if it had merged with the deepest meaning of the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics, and started to unknowingly comprehend the wonders of this technique. After 2 sessions, Tang Huan had already comprehended this cultivation method to a very deep degree. The most miraculous thing was that the deeper the comprehension of Great Harmony Heavenly Classics, the stronger Tang Huan's aura would be. Stage 9 is called Force. Above Force is Domain apostrophe. When the imposing manner has risen to a certain extent, it can be transformed into Heavenly Domain apostrophe, and what I need to do now is to slowly increase my imposing manner step by step. As long as the imposing manner is strong enough, the transformation will be natural. The fastest way to raise your imposing aura is to continue comprehending the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics. If you want to comprehend the technique, you need to once again enter the chaotic, bizarre state. To enter that state, you only need to allow the Nine Yang divine furnace to move faster than the limits of your body. To do this, the easiest way is to fight against the pterosaur again. While he was thinking, Tang Huan suddenly opened his eyes, his eyebrows revealing traces of excitement. In an unusually large inside the cave thousands of meters away, the pterosaur suddenly let out a low growl, and slowly opened his eyes. His drooping head was also lifted high, and a trace of suspicion flashed in his dark green eyes. After recuperating for several days, the previously depleted energy finally completely recovered. But just now, a bad premonition arose from the bottom of its heart, as if something bad was about to happen. Roar! Pterosaur shook his head anxiously, the dot in his eyes becoming stronger. At this moment, a roar that sounded like rolling thunder came from outside the cave without any warning. Evil creature, get the hell out. Chapter 614, Promotion. Roar! Pterosaur roared in anger, and rushed out of the inside the cave as if he had gone mad. He opened his gigantic wings and soared into the sky, looking extremely mighty. High up in the sky, Tang Huan's expression was solemn. The wings on his back spread, and the conqueror's spear appeared in his palm. Kill! Tang Huan roared madly, the spear in his hand dancing swiftly as he explosively shot forward. Another great battle broke out. This battle was even more intense than the previous one. Flaming rainbow spear art, Phoenix 5 steps, space moving, and all sorts of other skills were fully utilized by Tang Huan. Pterosaur had also learned from the experiences of the past few days. The two figures leaped up and down from the sky to the ground. Within a radius of a few thousand meters, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The sky changed color. This time, the pterosaur also activated her power, but the duration of the support for her power was shorter than the previous time. But the same thing happened. After the heavenly domain collapsed, although she was extremely furious, she did not continue to fight, but immediately left. Tang Huan did not chase after him. He dragged his exhausted body and quickly returned to the space aircraft S. However, after a few more days, Tang Huan's figure once again appeared in the air above the cave that pterosaur was hiding in, his voice shaking the heavens. Evil creature, do you dare to fight me? Evil creature, are you hiding inside like a cowardly turtle? Evil creature, hurry and come out. The great battle exploded again and again. Towards Tang Huan's provocation, the pterosaur was furious beyond compare. Every time, it would rush out of the cave like a firecracker, but the following battle made it feel more and more helpless. It seemed that after every battle, the opponent's strength would increase, and the time it took to maintain heavenly domain would become shorter and shorter. Unknowingly, a month had already passed. Inside the space aircraft, Tang Huan was lying on the edge of the round platform in the central plains. By the side, Zhao Budian was sleeping soundly. Not far away from him, Feng Ming was also quietly sitting cross-legged on the ground. Initially, when she knew that Tang Huan had battled with a heavenly domain fierce beasts, she was still rather worried, afraid that Tang Huan would have some mishap, but now, she was already used to it. After a while, Tang Huan suddenly woke up. He turned around and sat up, and revealed a satisfied smile. Battling the pterosaur was indeed a shortcut for raising his aura. Although each and every battle was extremely dangerous, Tang Huan was still constantly enjoying it. After 5 consecutive battles, Tang Huan's aura had become twice as powerful as before, and after the 6th battle, Tang Huan faintly felt that his aura had reached its limit. In a second, Tang Huan did not disturb Feng Ming and Zhao Budian, and quickly left the space aircraft once again. The forest outside was full of potholes, as if it was in ruins. The originally lush and flourishing ancient trees were either scattered on the ground or completely turned to dust. With a slight thought, an exceptionally terrifying aura swept out from within Tang Huan's body, and rolled out like a stormy sea. The instant this aura appeared, it had already condensed into an almost transparent substance that enveloped the surrounding tens of meters. In that moment, Tang Huan felt as if he had become the ruler of this small region. Heavenly domain? This change made Tang Huan happy. The biggest difference between an aura and a heavenly domain's aura was that after the aura seeped out of the body, it would no longer be under one's control, and would quickly dissipate, but would not dissipate. Furthermore, one could even control it, just like a pterosaur, and could even use a heavenly domain to weaken Tang Huan's attack. However, Tang Huan also understood that this wasn't the true heavenly domain he was in, but was instead a fake heavenly domain similar to Fentian. Although this kind of fake heavenly domain was condensed into a substance and would not dissipate, it was impossible for one to control it however they wished. But even so, it was hard to conceal the joy in Tang Huan's heart. His aura condensed and did not disperse, which meant that he had already touched the threshold of the heavenly domain. If there was a suitable opportunity, he could completely transform and become a real heavenly domain level expert at any time. At that moment, Tang Huan suddenly had the strong impulse to fight the pterosaur again. Without the slightest hesitation, wings condensed on Tang Huan's back and he soared into the sky. In about the time of a dozen breaths, Tang Huan had already arrived above a majestic and steep mountain range, and then descended quickly. A pitch-black gigantic cave was clearly imprinted in his eyes. Evil creature, come out and die! Tang Huan bellowed. The sound wave was like a clap of thunder, being forced by the genuine qi to roll forward, as though it was trying to overturn the entire cave. But after a while, Tang Huan frowned. Other than a few echoes, there were no other movements from the inside the cave. Although that guy would retreat every time the heavenly domain was broken into pieces and stopped fighting with Tang Huan, appearing to be extremely calm, it was actually not affected at all. The reason that it had become calm afterwards was probably because it had exhausted too much energy and had no choice but to remain calm. The previous few times, whenever Tang Huan scolded from the air, the pterosaur would immediately rush out aggressively. But now, when Tang Huan shouted from the cave entrance, it actually turned indifferent. Was it not in the cave? Roar! Just as Tang Huan was thinking about this, a roar came from afar, sounding very familiar. After a moment of hesitation, Tang Huan extended his wings and rushed up into the sky towards the sound. After about 5 kilometers, Tang Huan once again heard the familiar roar. It really is the pterosaur. Tang Huan could not help but laugh, but right after, another voice came from afar. Goo! That sound was extremely strange, but it was extremely penetrating. Pterosaur was fighting with other fierce beasts. Ordinary fierce beasts, even if they possessed the strength of peak stage 9, they wouldn't have any strength to fight back in front of pterosaur. Tang Huan couldn't help but become excited and suddenly increase his speed. The more he moved forward, the louder the cries of the two fierce beasts became. After approximately 5 kilometers, pterosaur's Peng Shao's figure finally appeared within Tang Huan's line of sight. A large piece of the continuously rising forest below seemed to have been bitten off from the middle. In that unkempt region, the pterosaur sprung up, shook its head and wagged its tail, as if he had gone insane. If Tang Huan was not mistaken, its body was probably already riddled with scars, and its opponent. Tang Huan opened his eyes in shock. He actually did not see the pterosaur's opponent, and could see that the fellow was jumping around crazily, as if he was alone. It was impossible for the pterosaur to not have opponents. Over there. Tang Huan subconsciously focused his gaze and moved closer. After a moment, Tang Huan finally caught a glimpse of a small white figure. Chapter 615, A Little White Rabbit. Such a small beast? Tang Huan was in disbelief. The fierce beast below him was probably at most the size of a bull, small to the point of being pitiful when compared to the pterosaur with his huge body. This kind of little fellow was actually able to cause the pterosaur to be left and right, making it look extremely miserable. What was even more surprising was that the heavenly domain that was activated by the pterosaur did not seem to have much effect on the little beast. It was actually faster than the pterosaur. However, the pterosaur can obviously fly high in the sky. Why are they entangled with that little beast on the ground? The little beast didn't have wings, so no matter how fast it was, it wouldn't be able to fight against pterosaur in the air. Tang Huan couldn't help but be suspicious, but very quickly, he felt relieved in his heart. To possess such strength, He must have lived for an extremely long period of time in this space. This meant that the small white beast and the pterosaur must have known each other for a long time. That little beast must have had something else that caused the pterosaur to be wary of, which was why it was willing to give up its greatest advantage. At this moment, Tang Huan suddenly thought of the fact that every time the pterosaur fought with him, the moment the heavenly domain dissipated, they would immediately retreat without the slightest hesitation. Could it be that it was because he was wary of the white beast that he wanted to preserve his strength and did not dare to exhaust himself too much? While thinking, Tang Huan continued to move forward. After a short while, he arrived at the top of the two fierce beasts. He was only a few hundred meters away from them, but even with the distance separating them, it was difficult for Tang Huan to see the white beast's appearance. It was just a blurry outline. Goo! The thunderous cries suddenly rang out, and the battle suddenly stopped. Tang Huan looked down, but after a moment, his expression became extremely strange. Pterosaur was lying on the ground exhausted, breathing heavily with a sound similar to that of Lei Ming's little white rabbit. The one who fought with the pterosaur and caused his entire body to be covered in injuries was actually a rabbit. Tang Huan came back to reality and couldn't help but to rub his eyes. This result was completely beyond his imagination. Or could it be that the fierce beast only looked like a rabbit, but was actually a different species? Goo! The little white rabbit called out again, as its eyes looked towards pterosaur, as if asking something. Roar, roar, howl. When the pterosaur heard him, he immediately stood up with all his might and roared out loud. From time to time, he would lift his head up high to glare at Tang Huan, who was high up in the sky. Hearing the voice below, Tang Huan's eyes flashed with a strange light. It seemed that the two fierce beasts were communicating with each other. In the next moment, a loud noise came from the sky and earth. The mound below the little white rabbit caved in with shocking speed, causing smoke and dust to billow around it. Soon after, a small white figure soared into the sky. With a flick of a finger, he was already more than 10 meters away from Tang Huan. Tang Huan was shocked. The one who rushed out from below was the little white rabbit. In a flash, his abdomen swelled up like an inflatable ball. In the time it took for 1 or 2 breaths, it had become as big as a dustpan. However, his head and limbs were still small and exquisite, which made him look extremely strange. However, although its current appearance was strange, its body did not fall down. Instead, it floated in front of Tang Huan like a feather, looking curiously at him with its red eyes. This time, Tang Huan finally understood why pterosaur did not fight in the air. It turned out that this little white rabbit also had the ability to fly. After the enlightenment, Tang Huan could not help but start probing carefully. This white rabbit's original appearance was the same as Zhao Budian's. They were both small and exquisite, and from top to bottom, not a single strand of mixed hair could be seen. What made Tang Huan even more surprised was that he could actually feel an abnormally rich spirituality from the white rabbit's body. It was not one bit inferior to Zhao Budian's. Could it be that it was not a fierce beast like the pterosaur, but instead a spiritual beast like him? The more Tang Huan thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. In the past, Tang Huan thought that the spirit beast's board was made by the human clan of this small world, but now, he finally understood that the spirit beast's board was actually from the forging god Great World. Tang Huan had the 2nd-ranked blue dragon, Mu Yan had the 7th-ranked rainbow spirit mouse, and Shen Shan had 2 6th-ranked blood plume heavenly hawk. The only ones he had ever seen were the blue dragon and the rainbow spirit mouse. Other than blue dragon, blood plume heavenly hawk and rainbow spirit mouse, Tang Huan had never heard of other spiritual beast appearing in the small realms. If this fellow was a spiritual beast, which one of the spirit beasts' boards did he belong to? While he was thinking, the names of the spirit beasts board flashed across his mind. Flying jade hare? After a while, Tang Huan could not help but exclaim softly. The 3rd-ranked spiritual beast of the spirit beasts board was called Flying Jade Hare. Could it be that this little white rabbit was him? Goo! Just as Tang Huan was feeling that something was off, the little white rabbit called out again. It pointed its little front paw at him, then at Tang Huan, and finally at the ground. "You want to fight with me?" Tang Huan regained his senses and could not help but cry out in surprise. The meaning of the little white rabbit's hand gesture was very simple. One could tell at a glance. "Gu." The little white rabbit seemed to understand the meaning of Tang Huan's words, its head nodding like a chicken pecking rice, and its bright red eyes revealed unconcealable excitement. However, Tang Huan did not feel any malicious intent from it. This little white rabbit was actually a battle maniac. Tang Huan was surprised. With its strength, killing pterosaur should not be a difficult task, but the pterosaur was still alive and well. Either they were friends, or it left the pterosaur to fight him. Judging from the pterosaur's injuries, the possibility of the two of them being friends was very small. "All right." In a moment, Tang Huan readily agreed to it. The more times he fought with the pterosaur, the worse the results would be. If he had no other choice, Tang Huan could only fight with the pterosaur for a few more rounds. Now that he had an even stronger opponent, Tang Huan could change his opponent. Whoosh! With a flap of its wings, Tang Huan dove down. "Goo!" The little white rabbit let out an excited cry, and its round body began to sink rapidly as it shrank. In the blink of an eye, one man and one rabbit fell to the ground. Chapter 616, The Little White Rabbit's Heavenly Domain. Moments later, two figures stood there, staring at each other. Tang Huan's fighting intent boiled, but his expression was extremely solemn. A spiritual beast that was much stronger than the pterosaur made him not dare to take it lightly. In between the mind instructs, in a second, the conqueror's spear appeared in his palm, and on the spear body, a fiery red glow quickly circulated, its heat surging. On the opposite side, 20 or 30 meters away, the little white rabbit was covered in fluffy fur and had completely returned to its original exquisite appearance. On the opposite side, 20 or 30 meters away, the little white rabbit was covered with fluffy fur and had completely returned to its original exquisite appearance. The pterosaur did not leave, but sneaked a few hundred meters away to watch the battle, seemingly taking pleasure in the misfortune. "Goo!" The little white rabbit sized up the conqueror's spear with its eyes, then suddenly emitted a voice like that of Lei Ming. Its two hind legs stomped on the ground fiercely, causing countless sand and dust to rise into the air like a tide. Kai! Tang Huan was slightly shocked. The long spear in his hand had already pierced over by reflex. The fire-red spear radiance flourished, bringing with it a blazing heat. It shot out from the tip of the spear in an instant. Previously, when Tang Huan had seen the big battle between the little white rabbit and the pterosaur, he was already shocked at its speed. Now that he was facing it personally, Tang Huan realized that its speed was actually faster than he had imagined. The incomparably sharp spear light instantly shattered. Tang Huan did not even have the time to react before the white figure continued to collide with the conqueror's spear, bringing with it a terrifying surge of immense power. Tang Huan only felt his arms shake, his hands going numb, but his body was like a cannonball, uncontrollably flying backwards. The white shadow was knocked back more than 10 meters before it landed on the ground. Such great strength! Tang Huan was pushed back several tens of meters before he could finally sink to the ground. His feet created a deep pit in the ground as the blood in his chest surged. Compared to the pterosaur, this little white rabbit's body was like a child's play, but the power that it exploded out when it attacked greatly surpassed the pterosaur. If Tang Huan had taken out an ordinary holy ranked weapon and not a divine armament like the Sun Spirit body, then not only would his weapon have been severely damaged, the spiritual meridian in his body might have been forcefully torn apart by the energy that invaded his body. The existence of the divine armament and the Sun Spirit body caused Tang Huan's body to feel a little uncomfortable, but it was not to the point of being uncomfortable. Goo! Dozens of meters away, the little white rabbit's red eyes widened, looking at Tang Huan seriously. Seeing that he was fine, it actually cried out in excitement. Immediately after, there was an explosive sound, and the white shadow once again rushed forward at an extremely terrifying speed, dragging behind it a string of afterimages. Behind it, the dust and dirt once again swirled up like yellow smoke. Ho! Seeing that, Tang Huan's pupils could not help but constrict, and in between the mind instructs, in a second, a majestic aura roared out, congealing into an almost transparent substance. Although this heavenly domain was only an incomplete product, it was still better than nothing. The little white rabbit could move around freely in Pterosaur's heavenly domain, so Tang Huan, this half-finished product heavenly domain, was probably not much of a threat to it. However, Tang Huan had never thought of using this half-finished product heavenly domain to block the little white rabbit's attack. He only wanted to use it to increase his own perception ability. In that moment, the white figure ruthlessly crashed into Tang Huan's heavenly domain as if it was a meteorite that contained the power of 50,000 kilograms. Kai, the Conqueror's spear in Tang Huan's hands, thrust it out without hesitation, the speed of his spear reaching its limit as well. Like a ray of fiery red light, it pierced through the air like lightning, meeting the attack head-on. In the blink of an eye, the sound of the collision was heard once again. Another huge force penetrated the spear and entered Tang Huan's body. Once again, as if he had suffered a heavy blow, Tang Huan uncontrollably retreated backwards. At the same time, the blazing storm created by the spear dissipated. Only then did Tang Huan land on the ground. He forcefully suppressed the urge to vomit blood, and his face became even more serious. As he expected, the little white rabbit's speed did not slow down in the slightest. However, after activating this half-completed heavenly domain, Tang Huan still discovered something that he did not notice before. The little white rabbit was actually enveloped in a completely transparent round cover. Compared to Pterosaur's Peng Shuo's black heavenly domain, the little white rabbit's completely transparent heavenly domain was almost negligible. However, its control over the heavenly domain was far beyond that of the Pterosaurs. As it was shuttling through the air, the white rabbit curled itself into a small ball and rolled forward. But just as it was about to approach the target, its body stretched out, head facing backwards, tail forward, and then its two hind legs ferociously kicked out. When it did this action, the shape of the heavenly domain also underwent a strange change. The ball actually turned into a pointed cone, and at that moment, the white rabbit's attack seemed to contain all of the heavenly domain's power. Although the pterosaur could also be used to control the heavenly domain, under its control, the heavenly domain could only be used to suppress the opponent and slow down the opponent's offense. It was difficult for the heavenly domain to be like the little white rabbit, fusing the heavenly domain's power into its own attacks and allowing it to unleash an incomparably terrifying power. In this regard, the two were on a completely different level. It was no wonder that the pterosaur would be reduced to such a miserable state. Goo! The little white rabbit was even more excited. This time, after it landed, it didn't stop at all and once again stood up with its legs on the ground. Tang Huan shouted out explosively, the tip of his spear, flames roaring out, burning fiercely. Almost at the same time, the skin on the surface of Tang Huan's body emitted a layer of golden luster, and the sun spirit body was pushed to the limit. Boom, boom. Following that, intense sounds of collisions began to ring out. The terrifying strength chi rippled and rippled as waves of dust and sand were swept up high into the sky. Within a radius of a few hundred meters, the area within a radius of 100 meters was soon covered in billowing smoke and dust. Different from the pterosaur who wanted to kill him at all times, Tang Huan could not feel a single trace of killing intent from this little white rabbit. Thus, he rarely used such dodging methods as Visional Phoenix 5 footwork and space moving and only used it to fight the white rabbit head-on. The difference in strength caused Tang Huan to fall into a bitter battle. However, relying on the powerful genuine chi and the sun spirit body, Tang Huan endured the attacks from the opponent time and time again. During this intense process, the Nine-Yang Divine Furnace that Tang Huan originally thought had reached its limit, actually increased its circulation speed once again. Chapter 617, Stop. Time flew, and Tang Huan and the little white rabbit were in the midst of an intense battle, but the gloating in the eyes of the distant pterosaur had already been replaced by amazement. It discovered that the bastard's strength that was pestering it had improved tremendously compared to the past few days. If it were to fight with him again, the result would likely be extremely bad. At least, with the heavenly domain unable to hold on, it would not be easy for it to retreat. This could be determined from the situation that Tang Huan had displayed during the battle. Soon, it was covered in wounds, and its strength was quickly depleted by more than half. As for that detestable bastard, even though he was at a disadvantage from the start, there were still a lot of things that happened between him and the little white rabbit. Especially until now, there didn't seem to be any obvious injuries on that bastard's body. The pterosaur's two green eyes that were following Tang Huan's figure kept moving back and forth, surprised and angry. There was an additional trace of anger in his eyes. Goo! The little white rabbit seemed to have eaten an aphrodisiac. The more it fought, the more excited it got. A tiny figure moved left and right, leaping back and forth. Its appearance could not be seen clearly. Hearing the excited cries of the little white rabbit, Tang Huan, on the other hand, became more and more apprehensive. The little white rabbit's attack method was very simple. It was the word stomp. However, its two hind legs displayed such a single move so vividly that it was hard to guard against. Its astonishing speed and terrifying force, along with the control of Heavenly Domain's arm and finger, allowed the little white rabbit's every kick to unleash an incomparable might. Fortunately, when Tang Huan activated this half-completed Heavenly Domain, he was able to clearly feel the trajectory of the little white rabbit's every attack. It was also because of this that he was able to attack continuously, and also because of the extremely strong endurance and recovery ability of the Sun Spirit body. If it was the Tang Huan from a few days ago, he would probably only be able to passively take a beating. If that was the case, even if he had the Sun Spirit body, he would have already fallen down. Unknowingly, Tang Huan had retracted his Conqueror Spear, and the technique he used had also changed to Five Elements magic. Following the rapid dance of his two hands, a dazzling golden light poured down from the sky like a waterfall, condensing into a shining golden round cover that enveloped him within. Surprisingly, this was the Metal Element magic golden bell cover, a very powerful defensive spell. At almost the same time, the little white rabbit's hind legs landed on top of the golden round cover, producing an earth-shaking cry. The substantial golden bell barrier immediately cracked, and the moment little white's legs reached their limit, a formless residual force smashed into Tang Huan's chest. Bang! Tang Huan retreated a few steps, and the little white rabbit landed on the ground as well. However, it once again somersaulted and soared into the air, spinning towards Tang Huan. Stop! The moment he stabilized his body, Tang Huan could not help but shout out. Goo! The white figure that looked like a shooting star first forcefully stopped in the air, then lightly floated down to the ground, revealing the fluffy body of the little white rabbit. The pair of crystal-clear ruby-like eyes sized up Tang Huan a few times, and the little white rabbit cried out in a low voice, as if it was quite suspicious. Tang Huan suppressed the urge to vomit blood, let out a long breath, and slowly said, "How about we end it here? We'll fight 6 days later?" This little white rabbit that looked like the spiritual beast Flying Jade Hair could be said to be an extremely abnormal battle maniac. After fighting for so long, Tang Huan had almost used up all of his genuine qi, and there weren't many left of his mind power left. However, the little white rabbit opposite him was still in high spirits, as if there was an endless amount of energy in his body that could never be used up. At this point, Tang Huan had no choice but to give up. If he continued to fight with it, it wouldn't be long before he ran out of energy. When the Nine Yang Divine Furnace went beyond its limit, if he continued to run out of energy, he would faint immediately. At that time, even if the little white rabbit did not attack, the pterosaur would probably come to take advantage of her. Therefore, Tang Huan had to take advantage of the fact that he still had some power and make a plan in advance. If the little white rabbit didn't want to stop, Tang Huan could only choose to escape. Goo goo. The little white rabbit seemed to understand what Tang Huan meant. It first tilted its head in hesitation, but then nodded its head. Then, its two front legs started to move non-stop, calling out non-stop, as if it was worried that Tang Huan wouldn't be able to keep up with it in 6 days. Tang Huan quickly understood its meaning and his expression relaxed. He nodded and smiled. "Rest assured, I will definitely come back in 6 days. Goo. The little white rabbit immediately opened its mouth in delight. Its pair of long and pointed ears began to shake. Its eyes narrowed slightly, as if it was laughing. Farewell. Tang Huan cupped his hands together and the wings on his back condensed and flew into the sky. A few hundred meters away, Pterosaur's eyeballs rolled as he stared at the figure that was getting smaller and smaller in the sky. A malevolent look suddenly flashed across his eyes, and he retreated backwards with light steps. After fighting for such a long time, that bastard definitely didn't have much energy left in his body. This was a good opportunity to wash away his shame. Goo. However, just as Pterosaur's figure was about to merge into the forest, an extremely familiar voice thundered into his ears. Pang Shao's body trembled all of a sudden when he heard this shout. His sturdy limbs also stiffened for a moment. Immediately after, the pterosaur acted as if he had heard the imperial edict. He turned around immediately and drooped his wings, dejected and slow as he moved forward. His eyes flashed with tears, as if he was about to cry. Goo. The little white rabbit dragged its voice and hooked a small claw at Pterosaur in dissatisfaction. Roar. Pterosaur released an extremely resentful screech, but he did not dare to tarry any longer. He braced himself and rushed forward, and the little white rabbit turned into a streak of white light as it shot over like lightning. The battle that had been interrupted earlier had once again begun. Whoosh. Sensing what was happening below, Tang Huan couldn't help but laugh. He was originally worried that the pterosaur would chase after him, but the unlucky fellow was already too busy to take care of himself. In a blink of an eye, Tang Huan pushed his speed to the limit, and flew forward frantically, the forest continuously flying past his body. Before long, Tang Huan had already traversed tens of kilometers and found the hidden space aircraft. Sneaking inside the cyan space, Tang Huan didn't even have time to speak to Feng Ming and Zhao Budian before he collapsed onto the ground, falling into a deep sleep. Capturing these minute movements, Feng Ming slightly raised his eyelids, but he quickly closed him and continued to immerse himself in cultivation. Zhao Budian did not even open his eyes, and only muttered a series of indistinct murmurs from his mouth before he continued to sleep. Chapter 618 Abduction. Inside the space aircraft, there was no distinction between day and night, but in the space outside, it was normal to alternate between day and night. A few days later, in the middle of the unruly, ravaged ruins within the forest, a little white rabbit was squatting on the ground, scratching its ears and cheeks. Suddenly, it stood up and paced back and forth, and its blood-red eyes seemed to flash with an extremely human-like anxiety. Not far behind the little white rabbit, Pterosaur was crawling on the ground, looking dispirited and listless. Goo! Suddenly, a thunderous shout rang out. Pterosaur immediately got up in panic. Her entire body was tensed, only to see the little white rabbit in front of him jumping up high. In the distant horizon, a black figure flew over. He heaved a sigh of relief, and in the next moment, Pterosaur collapsed to the ground again. He wanted to flee countless times, but in the end, he did not have the guts. He could only bear it in tears, and now that fellow was here, he was finally free. He was too lazy to even move his toes. High up in the sky, the little white rabbit's body swelled up rapidly, once again turning into a huge white ball. Its pair of bright red eyes were filled with excitement. Whoosh! Tang Huan flapped his wings and flew over. Not long later, he was only a few hundred meters away from the little white rabbit. This time, not only was Tang Huan here, she was also petty and brought Zhao Budian here. It and the flying jade hare were both spiritual beastess, so they might have something in common. Although Zhao Budian was extremely strong in terms of the gem detection and sense of danger, his fighting ability was almost negligible. Even though his body had expanded to the limit, he was still not a match for Demon Clan. If it were to meet a low-level Eagleman, it could still rely on its speed to escape, but if it met a Eagleman of the Stage 9, even if Zhao Budian wanted to escape, he could not. Being too weak could be said to be Zhao Budian's fatal flaw. It was impossible for Tang Huan to keep it inside the space aircraft, and outside, it would be difficult for him to take care of it at all times. If he had a companion like the flying jade hare, Tang Huan would no longer have to worry about Zhao Budian's safety. Ever since he came to this world, this little white rabbit was definitely the strongest ever seen by Tang Huan. Even the demon lord Fen Tian, who was known as the strongest amongst the 3 clans in the small world, would not be a match for this little white rabbit without using a soul attack. When he had guessed the little white rabbit's background, Tang Huan had already thought of this. Yeah! On Tang Huan's neck, Zhao Budian let out an incomparably shocked cry. The 2 little claws that were grabbing onto Tang Huan's collar couldn't help but cover his mouth, while his pair of blue eyes widened, unbelievably looking at the fluffy white ball in front of him. Goo! The little white rabbit also discovered Zhao Budian's presence and couldn't help but call out to him in confusion. Its 2 hind legs stomped in the air and its round body shot forward at an astonishing speed. Smiling at the little white rabbit, Tang Huan patted Zhao Budian's butt. Yeah, yeah, as if he had just awoken from a dream. Zhao Budian flapped her 3 pairs of small wings and floated up from Tang Huan's neck. Goo goo! The little white rabbit opened her mouth slightly and sized Zhao Budian up from head to toe. Yeah! Zhao Budian seemed to have understood the meaning of its voice. The little claws pointed at her wings, then turned around and patted the 2 sarcoma-like protrusions on her wings, as though it was showing off its 4th pair of wings that had not grown yet, a pleased look on its face. Goo goo! The little white rabbit opened its eyes wide and let out an exclamatory cry. It seemed to be extremely envious. Yeah? Zhao Budian slowly approached and at the same time pointed at the round body of the little white rabbit in confusion. This time, it was the little white rabbit's turn to be complacent. Her inflatable body shrunk and expanded rapidly. Between sizes, it changed as it pleased. Yeah! Zhao Budian was dumbstruck as he watched, his voice sounding extremely long. Goo goo! The little white rabbit grinned as if it was laughing. Yeah! Goo, 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 yeah! The 2 little fellows started conversing without any hindrance. Unknowingly, both sides got closer and closer to each other. In the end, Zhao Budian couldn't help but use his little claws to poke the little white rabbit's round belly lightly. The little white rabbit, after being stunned for a short moment, couldn't help but touch Zhao Budian's shining sharp horn. 10 meters away, Tang Huan did not make a sound, but was secretly rejoicing. The reason spiritual beasts were called spiritual beast was not only because their spirituality far surpassed ordinary beasts, but also because they possessed an incomparably shocking space to grow. For example, the pterosaur below him, his current strength had probably reached its limit, so no matter how much it increased, it would be difficult for a qualitative change to occur. However, Zhao Budian was different. He could still gradually grow into an 8-winged, 10-winged, or even a 12-winged blue dragon. This was the same for the flying jade hare. Its current strength was far from its limit, and it could still continue to break through like a cultivator. Flying jade hare obviously wanted it to improve its own strength further. Otherwise, there was no need for it to force the pterosaur below it to become its sparring partner. However, it was a pity that although the pterosaur was already a heavenly domain fierce beasts, their strength was far too lacking compared to it. No matter how much battle they had, it would only have a limited effect on the little white rabbit's growth. However, within this region, the pterosaur was probably the strongest existence other than the little white rabbit. Therefore, the little white rabbit had no other choices, but if it really wanted to continue breaking through, it could only find another opponent. Presumably, it was precisely because of this that the little white rabbit was able to obtain such a treasure with his appearance. From this perspective, the chances of taking the little white rabbit out were very high. It had stayed here all this time, perhaps because it didn't know what was going on outside. As long as Zhao Budian could obtain the flying jade hare's trust, it would naturally be able to leave this place. Looking at Zhao Budian and the little white rabbit's current situation, this matter was very promising. As Tang Huan thought about it, a slight smile unconsciously appeared between his brows. Bringing Zhao Budian here this time was indeed a wise move. Yeah. In front of him, Zhao Budian suddenly pointed at his back. Goo. However, the little white rabbit shook its head like a rattle. Yeah. Zhao Budian cried out, her small body suddenly expanding rapidly. This sudden turn of events gave the little white rabbit a big fright. Its body suddenly retreated dozens of meters, and Zhao Budian raised his front paw again as he pointed at his own back, which had become even wider and thicker. After hesitating for a little while, the little white rabbit finally approached Zhao Budian again. When she reached on his back, her body quickly shrunk like a balloon and she had already recovered in the blink of an eye. Chapter 619, Wonderfruit. Yeah! Zhao Budian let out an excited cry. First, he brought the little white rabbit along with him and dove down at a high speed. When they were only a few meters from the ground, its 3 pairs of wings suddenly flapped, and like lightning, they shot up to a height of a few hundred meters high in the sky. Then, Zhao Budian started to spin like a top again. The little white rabbit stayed close to Zhao Budian's back, not moving at all. Although it had the ability to fly, it had always been straightforward. It had never made such a dangerous move before. All of a sudden, it cried out in excitement. Zhao Budian immediately looked as if he was on stimulants as he continued to perform all kinds of incomparably brilliant tricks in the air. Tang Huan laughed secretly in his heart. After that, he retracted his wings and floated down. At the ruins on the ground, the pterosaur who was originally lying on the ground couldn't help but squat up. When he raised his head to look up at the sky, his large eyes stared blankly. Only after a while did pterosaur regain his senses. His eyes were actually filled with grief and indignation. What right did that bastard have to get along so well with that perverted little beast, while he was being abused again and again? What right did he have to do that? Pterosaur suddenly clenched his teeth, with a sinister look in his eyes. He wished that he could grab the blue beast and strangle it to death. However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, Pterosaur couldn't help but shiver. In the blink of an eye, that detestable bastard had already snuck up to her, and was already within reach. This made her heart ice cold, and her eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. Now, he was already exhausted. If he were to make a move, his ending would definitely be extremely miserable. Seeing Tang Huan looking at him with a smile that was not a smile, the pterosaur became even more terrified. After a while, it suddenly bent its front legs, and with a plop, it kneeled on the ground and looked pitifully at Tang Huan. Seeing that, Tang Huan was startled. He suddenly stopped and could not help but burst out laughing. "Rise, don't worry. I will not bully you." Roar! Pterosaur growled as he hurriedly straightened his front legs. He felt as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, but at the same time, he felt a little ashamed and angry at the same time. As a dignified heavenly domain fierce beasts, it had fallen to the point of begging its opponent not to bully it, and the tears in its eyes were about to spill out. However, it did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction, because if this repulsive bastard changed his mind, it would not even be able to cry. Tang Huan laughed, and suddenly realized that it was too quiet high up in the sky. He immediately looked up, and was shocked to see that Zhao Budian and the little white rabbit were already gone. However, Tang Huan was relieved very quickly. With the little white rabbit, Zhao Budian couldn't possibly encounter any accidents. As for the little white rabbit, it was even more impossible for it to have any evil intentions towards Zhao Budian. With its tyrannical strength, if it really wanted to harm Zhao Budian, it would have long been possible for it to do so. Tang Huan calmed himself down and immediately sat down, quietly sensing the situation within the Danshan. The big battle with the little white rabbit a few days ago had not only once again increased the circulation speed of the Nine Yang Divine Furnace, it had also caused Tang Huan's aura to become even stronger and more condensed. If he fought with the flying jade hair a few more times, he might be able to continue to improve. Tang Huan also had a strong urge at the bottom of his heart. If the circulation speed of the Nine Yang Divine Furnace reached its true limit, what kind of situation would occur? In a moment of thought, Tang Huan had already activated his aura, forming the half-finished state of the heavenly domain, enveloping the area 10 meters around him. The pterosaur immediately felt a huge pressure on him, as though he had been struck hard. He was so stifled that he wanted to vomit blood, and quickly ran 100 meters away with his tail between his legs. When its power was at its peak, it could still withstand the pressure, but now, It was on the verge of collapsing. Tang Huan calmed his heart and concentrated, and very quickly, he was immersed in it. The half-finished heavenly domain suddenly expanded, and then shrank. Yeah, goo goo. After an unknown amount of time, Tang Huan was suddenly awoken by two clear cries. With a thought, the half-finished heavenly domain quickly shrunk, and his slightly closed eyes opened wide. Zhao Budian and the little white rabbit immediately entered his field of vision. Dozens of meters away, Zhao Budian had clearly just landed on the ground. His huge body immediately retracted back to its original state, and ran back to Tang Huan excitedly. The little white rabbit was also incomparably happy. Its small body was bouncing up and down, and its two large front teeth were showing in its mouth from time to time. Looks like these two little fellows get along quite well. Just as he was about to spring up, he suddenly realized that Zhao Budian's two little claws were holding a round object, which was about the size of an egg. It seemed to be some kind of fruit, with a milky white color, and there were even strands of white mist lingering on the surface of the fruit. Even from 20 to 30 meters away, Tang Huan could smell a refreshing fragrance. After taking a light breath, he felt as if all his organs and limbs had become extremely smooth. 100 meters away, Pterosaur, who had regained some of his strength, seemed to have discovered something. His pair of green eyes suddenly released a bright light and became uncontrollable as he charged forward. When Zhao Budian arrived in front of Tang Huan, he was already less than 2 meters away from. He opened his mouth, and his scarlet tongue shot out like lightning. Goo! The little white rabbit suddenly pricked its ears and let out an angry cry. It sounded like a thunderbolt, and the moment the note exploded, the entire world seemed to tremble. Pterosaur suddenly woke up from his stupor, and his thick tongue paused in the air. The greed in his eyes quickly retreated, and his tongue returned to his mouth. He glanced at the little white rabbit, who was not far away, and bowed his head, showing a fawning expression. Yeah! Zhao Budian regained his senses, angrily glared at Pterosaur, and brought the milky white fruit over to Tang Huan. For me? Tang Huan was startled. He looked at Zhao Budian and then at the little white rabbit. Goo goo. The little white rabbit nodded as its expression relaxed. Thank you very much. Tang Huan laughed unwittingly. He raised his hand to touch Zhao Budian's head, and took the fruit from him. His tentacles were soft and extremely elastic, as though he was holding a small ball filled with water, and if he used even a little more strength, the skin would crack, and the juice would burst out. Just from Pterosaur's reaction just now, one could tell that this fruit was definitely not ordinary. Tang Huan took a light breath. The fragrance became even stronger, causing him to feel intoxicated. Not far away, the Pterosaur could not help but sniff, licking his lips, drooling from the corner of his mouth, as though he wished to swallow the fruit whole. Chapter 620. Breakthrough. Tang Huan gently caressed the fruit and glanced at Pterosaur's drooling appearance. He was even more surprised. This fruit was so coveted by heavenly domain fierce beasts, who was at his level of strength. It must have a very miraculous effect, just that he did not know what the exact effect was. Goo goo. Just then, the little white rabbit pointed to the fruit and then to Tang Huan's mouth. Her meaning was very obvious. You mean I should eat it now? Tang Huan was startled. Goo goo. The little white rabbit nodded. Yeah. Zhao Budian also quickly waved his two little claws towards Tang Huan, trying to urge him forward. Alright, I'll eat it. Tang Huan did not react. Just by looking at the expressions of the little white rabbit, Zhao Budian and the Pterosaur, he knew that this fruit would definitely not cause any harm. Since that was the case, there was no harm in eating it. With that said, Tang Huan directly stuffed the entire fruit into his mouth. With just a light bite, the sweet and thick juice burst open in his mouth. He quickly swallowed it a few times, and then, the entire fruit had been eaten, and not even the skin was left behind. A rich cool feeling spread from his throat to his abdomen, and then, wildly spread out, from the flesh body to his soul. In just the blink of an eye, Tang Huan felt like his entire body was wrapped up by that refreshing feeling. Without any hesitation, Tang Huan immediately activated the Great Harmony Heavenly Classics. Inside the Danshan, the 9 Yang Divine Furnace and the 5 Colors Spiritual Pills quickly circulated, and not long after, strands of cool air converged onto the nine yang divine furnace, and after being refined, it quickly mixed with the 5 colors spiritual pills. Time passed bit by bit, and more coolness was refined and fused. At almost every moment, Tang Huan could feel a subtle but bizarre change from the spirit palette, and after the initial surprise, Tang Huan had already completely calmed down and immersed himself. By the side, the pterosaur saw that after Tang Huan ate the fruit, he withered away like a wilted eggplant, and looked at the little white rabbit with a grudge in his eyes. Unfortunately, the little white rabbit seemed to ignore it, staring at Tang Huan, as if observing the changes after he consumed the fruit. Zhao Budian also stared straight at Tang Huan, his dark blue eyes filled with anticipation. Goo, goo. Not long after, the little white rabbit cried out a few times. A trace of astonishment and surprise appeared in its red eyes. Yeah, yeah. Zhao Budian knew that it was surprised by Tang Huan's speed in refining the fruit, and could not help but nod its head, with a smile in its eyes, and an expression of pride. Goo goo, yeah. The little white rabbit and Zhao Budian chirped from time to time. They understood the meaning behind the other party's words very well, but in the end, the pterosaur was not smart enough. Although it could occasionally think of something, most of the time, it would just listen with its head full of fog. Time quickly passed by as the two little fellows emitted bursts of chirping sounds. Unknowingly, the sky had already darkened and the area was shrouded in darkness. Zhao Budian squatted by Tang Huan's side and dozed off. His eyes suddenly closed and then opened, and his little head fell off, his entire body carelessly falling to the ground. After that, he woke up with a jolt, and immediately shook his head and sat back up. But not long later, he regained his composure. About a meter away, the little white rabbit was sitting on the ground with its eyes closed, motionlessly. Several hundred meters away, the pterosaur was lying on the ground, sound asleep and snoring like thunder, the loud sound reverberating throughout the entire area. After an unknown amount of time, some light finally appeared in the sky. Goo! The white rabbit that was as still as a statue seemed to have sensed something and her gaze landed on Tang Huan. In the distance, the pterosaur also woke up. He flipped over and sat up, and looked towards Tang Huan. At this time, Zhao Budian had already fallen into a deep sleep, his forelimbs spread across his full stomach. Abruptly, the void began to fluctuate rapidly, as a terrifying formless energy surged out from Tang Huan's body, rolling towards his surroundings like a tidal wave. All of a sudden, the surroundings were filled with sand and rocks, and dust was flying everywhere. Yeah! Zhao Budian screamed as he woke up from his stupor. Even if it flapped its 3 pairs of wings with all its might, it still could not withstand the force and involuntarily retreated a few meters away. However, it soon discovered that the surging force had suddenly disappeared without a trace, and its body also hovered in the air without any forewarning. It was only then that he realized that the little white rabbit was floating beside him, and that his abdomen had already swelled up slightly. The transparent round cover that had grown out of his body had already covered both of them, and was resisting the invasion of the energy from outside. At such a moment, the little white rabbit had already activated its heavenly domain. Yeah? Zhao Budian licked his lips and exhaled, but then he seemed to have thought of something and his gaze fell on Tang Huan. He started to scream anxiously, with a questioning tone. Goo! The little white rabbit nodded, but continued to stare at Tang Huan without blinking. Yeah! Receiving a definite answer from the little white rabbit, Zhao Budian was immediately excited. His dark blue eyes revealed a terrifying light. Just at this moment, another terrifying energy fluctuation swept out from the two little fellows' faces, then followed by a third, then a fourth. Soon after, a violent storm seemed to have been created around Tang Huan, as countless sand and dust began to swirl up in waves, and within a radius of a few hundred meters, the sky had already turned blurry. Within the storm, the little white rabbit and Zhao Budian, who were both enveloped by the heavenly domain, did not even budge an inch. However, the distant pterosaur uncontrollably spread his wings and soared into the sky, rising to a height of over a kilometer. Dust filled the air and Tang Huan's figure was gradually covered up. However, The energy fluctuations that leaked out from Tang Huan's body did not show any signs of weakening and instead continued to grow stronger. At that moment, Tang Huan was immersed in an abnormal feeling. In the instant that the fruit was completely refined and absorbed, it was as if an invisible barrier suddenly exploded inside the Danshan and even the inside of the soul, and instantly disappeared without a trace. It made Tang Huan feel like he had been reborn.